Welcome everybody to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host Gwen. With me as always is Jared. And this week we are diving back into the world of Outlander, but we're traveling to Paris, France. With some stopovers in Inverness and Boston. But yeah, welcome everybody who's tunes in live and watches later. I hope you're all doing well. How are you doing, Jared?
I'm doing very well. This is kind of even though we're not billing it as such, this is kind of a special stream because this is the 100th stream officially that you and I have done together on this channel. So we're going to be celebrating in a couple of weeks, I think like 4 weeks, the official 100th stream as co-host. That seemed like a more appropriate, ceremony occasion to blow out because we already had this one booked, and the first four times I was on this channel were guest spots. But I mark it nonetheless. It's a fun milestone to reach and a fun topic to discuss.
Yeah, I didn't realize that caught me off guard because I thought you had actually marked the actual 100th episode as the one, so this is a bit of a surprise. I think we are still gonna do something special for our slightly less accurate but more official 100th episode. And we might be talking something that we have never quite talked about on the channel before, and that has been long in the making. We discussed it as a possibility, and more I'm feeling like that might be the way to go. And that'll be fun and cathartic.
Yes, indeed. And we will reveal it, in good time. But once we officially make it, but yes, it is. It's kind of a fun milestone to commemorate because yes, it will. The reason we're doing that one is because it'll be the 100th stream as official co-host and our 100th done consecutively. The 4 guest appearances I had before that were kind of spread out over a couple of years. So, and also you and I have done streams together on other channels too. So like, it kind of felt like that was the more like definitive milestone to mark.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, that's exciting, and then just sort of talking about sort of what I got up to this weekend. We don't always do these kinds of what's going on in your life, but I just thought I ought to mention I got the chance to meet up with a couple of our friends, Laura and Trish, here in Florida. I drove about an hour and a half to hang out with them for lunch, and just had a wonderful time. It was way too short, but I'll take whatever I can get, and I know a couple of us, including Trish and probably it's looking like Nessie, and we'll see who else is interested. We'll be getting together in October or late September, actually, for a convention in Ocala, which I actually went to last year with Trish. So we'll be doing a repeat of that. Hopefully I won't come home majorly sick this time.
I was going to say last time it turns out there were other things going on, but last time it was around that time last year that you unfortunately started to have some health issues that you talked about at length, and it's just as you said, you're doing much better right now, and hopefully that streak continues and you can just enjoy the time with our friends there.
Yeah, it'll be a redo. But yeah, so yeah, like anything going on with you that since I just did before we jump into the conversation?
No, and just like I said, I'm working. I'm enjoying life here in beautiful California, but they keep me busy nonetheless. But that's okay because I've got things to look forward to in the coming weeks and months, and so I'm just and including all our discussions, which are always a highlight.
Yeah. And so this week we're diving into the next season of Outlander. And yeah, it's this time around, we're in France with Claire and Jamie and Murtaugh and some new friends. So I'm just gonna get your big picture reaction. How did you receive this season? Or
Well,
these
it's funny.
episodes?
I was going to say it's funny that you say season, even though it is actually only half a season, because it really
Yeah,
does feel like a full season of television. And,
yeah,
I actually had to remind myself at once I finished it that like, oh no, there's an entire second half that we've yet to get
yeah,
to. But as you have always pointed out, like this season really was kind of broken down, even though they didn't air it that way. It was kind of broken down into two distinct parts. And
yeah,
I really enjoyed these episodes a lot. I hadn't realized how much fun it was going to be to dive back into the show after we'd been away for a couple weeks, and I had you know, I'm doing the season by season watching as we go with Tricks. So I was just like, I'm going to wait until I actually am ready to talk about it on the channel to watch the episodes. But in particular, I will just note that this season surprised me in a couple of different ways that I wasn't expecting. Not in the least of which was how the season starts, because even though I do not, like I said, even though I'm doing my best to stay spoiler free, I did watch the trailer for that you posted for the season. That's in the description, and that season 2 trailer ends, of course, with Claire back in modern day, or her modern day, Inverness in the 1946, I believe. And reunited with her husband Frank and saying, "I'm back," and him smiling, saying, "I'm so grateful." And I thought, like, because you had talked about the fact that this season has kind of a distinct edge, my mind started turning like, oh, maybe that's how this half of the season ends. That'll be kind of an interesting reset point. And then I'm like, then I started the episode like, oh no, we're doing this right freaking now. and I ended up really actually liking that choice, because that first episode is, I think, one of my favorites of the entire show so far. And But of course, there's plenty of other great stuff to get to later in the season, including the heartbreaking developments that kind of conclude, take place in the final episode, which was also a surprise for me. Because I'll just say one of the very few spoilers that I knew before I ever watched the show was that Jamie and Claire had a daughter, and that daughter was named Brianna. And so when Claire announced she was pregnant at the end of season 1, I just naturally assumed, oh, well, this is her. Turns out, no. And we do get to see her. I think I assume that's Brianna in the little Boston flashback in 1954, and obviously when Claire is pregnant when she goes back through the stones. But that meant it was a genuine surprise to me when Claire, under tragic circumstances, loses her stillborn daughter, Faith. And that episode, even though it's heartbreaking, I found to be very, beautiful and contemplative and emotional. And that was also one of my favorite episodes of the show. So, and in between, there's a lot of great stuff. In particular, one of the recurring joyful touchstones we will have is Murtaugh's not less than favorable opinion of France and all of its fashion styles. He finds some happiness there too. But yeah, it was a really fun series of 7 episodes, and given where we leave things off, I'm really looking forward to getting back to maybe Outlander Classic Edition in the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's I was really anxious to see your reaction to the beginning of the season, and I did have a twinge of, like, when I put the trailer on the stream, as I always do. I was like, oh, I kind of hope Jared doesn't watch this because there's a couple things in there. But I'm happy to hear that you were still surprised in the way that that story element was implemented, because it's not what because like season 1 ends with Jamie and Claire like sailing off for France with the future ahead of them, and the sort of the last thing you expect is to start off season 2 with Claire having returned and greeted by the news that what they headed off to at the end of the last season in great hope for, which was stopping the Jacobite uprising and then the massacre at Culloden. Right off the bat we hear, nope, they failed. And this whole season is in great part about them on that mission, and you kind of forget for a little while that it's doomed. You sort of get caught up in it, but there is that tragedy looming over all of this. And even though they seemingly end these episodes kind of feeling like they've achieved sort of what they set out to do, which was to sort of disrupt the plans for the getting the rebellion kickstarted, but we know that they're still doomed to end up repeating history. So that's kind of a dangling sort of thread left to be addressed in the second half of the season. But yeah, it's just like you feel like full of hope in the final moments of season 1, and then it just crushes you in the opening of the season. And we get the reunion of Claire and Frank, which was something that was sort of something that was very tantalizing, and in season 1 with Claire's determination, but then we're greeted with just her utter, like, being utterly shattered at leaving this life behind now that she's felt has become home, and the man that she's fallen in love with. So yeah, I just I was very anxious to get your take on how that like sort of put you on the back foot for your expectations.
Yes. Even though, like I said, it surprised me. I ended up really being a fan of the choice because it does kind of cast a shadow over the entire proceedings that are happening in the past. That kind of lets that we are what we are leading up to, and it kind of gives their whole quest, to change the future, such as it is, in a kind of a doomed quality. Although we'll see exactly how doomed it is, because there are different types of time travel shows. I've come to realize, there are the shows where it's basically whatever happened, and it was always happened that way, and everything was done is kind of set in iron, and you can never change anything. Then there are shows where there's a little bit more flexibility in that, where maybe you can change some things, but there are certain big kind of cultural touchstone moments that are kind of immovable. And it seems like the Battle of Culloden may be one of those. And then there are the shows, which I think this Outlander has shown us it is not, which is basically like, oh no, you can go back and you can completely rewrite the past, and maybe even erase yourself from existence if you're not careful, or erase your former your husband from existence, and then there's the basically like the Avengers multi-branching timelines kind of show. But I kind of feel like Outlander has proven that it's probably more in the past is set up to a point, and there are certain things you cannot change, but maybe you do still have room to kind of set your own destiny, because characters' choices have to matter. But I do appreciate, for instance, that this show is essentially letting us know that something as significant as the Battle of Culloden, was unfortunately always meant to happen that way, and that gives Jamie and Claire kind of kind of a tragic quality in there, but it means that maybe like their future does not have to end there as such as they see it. So because the start of this season, I was really struck by a couple of different things. One, just how freaking great Tobias Menzies is, particularly as this character, as Frank, because we didn't see him at all in the back half of season 1. We just saw him as Blackjack Randall, and while he's great as that too, Blackjack's kind of a tough hang. You don't really love spending time with that character for multiple reasons. And Frank, the moment he came back on screen, and just the delight and joy he sees at the reunion with his wife, and then kind of the heartbreaking realization that something has definitively changed, but then also his kind of determination to recognize that what is still important to him, this woman, his wife, his love, is still important to him, and his determination to make it work. And I found that a really admirable quality, and we can talk more about the specifics, but and Claire in particular, just seeing her utter devastation at the loss of Jamie, to death, she believes, it seems, but also just the loss of the life that they had led together, the life that she had chosen at that point, and just her recognition that, I think it's clear that she still has love for Frank. One of the things that's interesting about the way this season is structured is a major plot point in the latter half of this part of the season is Claire essentially trying to protect Frank, trying to protect Frank's existence. Not only because she, loves him as her husband, but also because he was a major part of her life. Without him, she probably never would have gone through the stones in the first place. So who knows what would happen if he gets erased. But I have a feeling that, again, that the show has kind of given us hints as to why Frank's existence is in fact not in danger. Namely, I don't actually think he's descended directly from Blackjack Randall. I think there might be another candidate. But
so you picked up on that.
I did, and I think it part of it is just the fact that the moment that Jack Randall's brother Alex comes on the scene, and he's a much nicer and milder mannered guy. I'm like, this seems more like the Frank, even though he doesn't look as much like the Tobias. And also, let's just say, I think that the wound that Blackjack takes in his duel with Jamie might render him incapable of having kids anyway. So we'll see how that plays out. But
I remember as soon as Alex came on the screen, and just by the way, they did a freaking phenomenal job casting, because dear God, does he look like he could be Tobias Menzies' brother.
Yes.
But immediately you're like, oh yeah, I buy that Frank is descended from this guy. That makes much more sense. Which is not to say that Frank has been without his darker moments. We saw, a bit of that last season, and then we get a bit of it this season. But he's in. But he seems like those are moments where you can see some, rage boiling under the surface because of just the emotions that he's going through. But he ultimately exerts control over that part of himself. So and Blackjack absolutely chooses to unleash the monster.
Yeah.
And so that's a big difference between the two of them.
Yeah, there's actually a rather fitting line from Claire in, I think, episode 7, when she's kind of serving as the judge in this sham trial that Louis XV is conducting, where she looks at these two men and she says, I see darkness, but only the darkness that is present in every man, even a king. And I think that's the type of darkness that lives in Frank, whereas Blackjack, as he said in back in season 1, I dwell in darkness, madam, and darkness is where I belong. He has chosen to become as twisted and evil as he is. And we'll get into it later, but, I thought we had seen the worst of Blackjack Randall in season 1. And then I was like, oh no, turns out there's a lower depth he can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll get to that later. What I would say about this first episode in particular is just like, again, I was just really, really impressed with how great the acting was from both Katrina Balfe and Tobias Menzies, and in particular Tobias Menzies, because the way he's having to reconcile all these difficult, conflicting emotions. First, having being reunited with his wife, then realizing things are different, then being told this incredible story that seems impossible, but deep down, I think he recognizes that it is true. And then him essentially dealing with it, as you said, the kind of the understandable anger of the fact that, a woman, his wife, who had pledged herself to him, till death do us part, has clearly, her heart has shifted, and him recognizing that it, like, as much as he was longing and wishing for Claire to come back, a part of her never truly came back at all. But then that beautiful conversation he has with Reverend Wakefield, that kind of helps start to turn his heart and makes him realize that there is still something that we can share, even if he has, as he says, conditions that, like, as if we are going to resume our life together, like, then I want it to be us. I want it to be real. I want this child to essentially be raised with a father she can see and touch and hold, not the ghost of a man she can never reach. And you, Claire, if we are going to resume being husband and wife, I cannot share you in the sense that I don't mean forget Jamie, but you cannot be poring over these books and pining every waking second of the day for this man you have to live. And it seems like Claire has made that, accepted that choice when she agrees to go with Frank to Boston. But of course, I'm sure that the story is more complicated than that, because we only get some hints with that. But regardless, it really just kind of reinforced for me, like, just how much I felt for Frank in that, in that exchange, because none of this is his fault. As he said, like, he, when everyone was telling him that Claire had left him for another man, just like in a more conventional sense, and he's like, I wanted to, everyone told me to move on. I wanted to hate you so that I could move on, but I just couldn't. He loves her too much. And like, that was, I think that was really important for us to hear, to remind ourselves that, yes, Frank is not a perfect man. He's got some flaws, as all characters do, but he is not his so-called ancestor Blackjack Randall. He is not evil, and as much as, like, shippers sometimes like to make things black and white, this is not a black and white situation. Obviously, the show is more Team Jamie and Claire than Team Frank and Claire, but Frank and Claire was real, and it is still, real. And I'm very interested to see how their life together unfolds in the present day, while we still are untangling Jamie and Claire's life in the past.
Yeah, it's well, we won't be sort of finding that out in the immediate future. I can promise you that we'll be following up the difficulties of their marriage, because some things are easier said than done. But yeah, no, I find Frank to be one of the most tragic characters of, not the tragic character of the show, just because he has so much love for Claire, and he did not ask for any of this to happen, and he's just unfortunately sort of trying to do the best he can, and um and it's no small thing, but he says that he wants to raise this child as their own. and we'll see, that in the future, and the effect that has on Brianna as she grows up. And I also really love the touch of, he's asking her to move on and let him go, but then as she's having difficulty removing Jamie's ring, he says, "It's all right when you're ready." And I think that really speaks to his character. Yeah, Tobias Menzies is just so goddamn good. And speaking of that scene, like, fuck, Bear McCreary, like, just knocking out the part when then it just, the score is sort of softly playing, Frank and Claire's, love theme underneath. And then as, we see Claire looking out the window and Frank is, burning the clothes from the past, and the music just soars, and it, transitions to them arriving in Boston, and it's just so good. And then the way it just slowly, keeps tugging at our emotions as they're coming down, the gangway, from the airplane, and it slowly morphs into an explosion of Jamie and Claire's theme as we transition to Paris. And it's just like, in that moment, it's such a mixture of emotions, because you're like, oh, we've just been shown where this is leading, but you know what? Let's forget about that for a second, and let's just revel in the joy of Claire and Jamie being back together. And like, immediately their chemistry is like, it's reminding us of why they're so great together. And I just thought that was so beautifully done.
Yes, and that moment kind of reminded me of the famous poster from season 1 with Claire reaching out at Frank, who's off screen, and then heading towards Jamie, which I'm sure that was in somebody's mind when they constructed that shot. But I like Frank and Claire, as you said, I'm sure that what lies ahead for them will be rocky. But I do appreciate that the show is, as I said, taking a much more human approach with Frank and a more human approach with Claire, where a lesser show or story would have probably just given Claire free reign to, just be head over heels with Jamie because her prior husband was like an awful caricature, and that is not what this show has done. So, and so like I said, ultimately, I know that this show, again, one of the things I know is that eventually Jamie and Claire are, together for most of the show. So, I do think that we're probably not going to have Frank for forever, but I am appreciative of the time that we do have with him, and the fact that Claire's emotions, are still real and still complicated. And as we touched on, like the fact that she is so determined to essentially protect Frank's existence for a whole host of reasons, even if it means, as she believes, sparing the life of this man who has treated both her and Jamie like horribly, tells us that, what kind of woman she is and what kind of perspective she has. And I also appreciated that, like, we also saw that, because there was a great moment that we'll get in episode 4, I think it is, or episode 4, episode 5, where Mary, after what has happened to her, gives Claire the letter basically that will exonerate Alex and free him from the Bastille, and Claire recognizes in that moment that she could essentially, she thinks, preserve Frank's existence by throwing that letter in the fire, and that was when we were like, don't you fucking dare. And I was so glad that Claire's better than that, a better person than that, and she finds what she thinks is another way to, kind of keep them apart. But as I said, I have a feeling that this is something that where, fate is working out in a mysterious way.
It's I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying, because it's on full display over these episodes, is that Outlander, in my opinion, kind of follows the Star Trek for the voyage home,
Yeah.
laws of time travel, of where, of course, by giving him the formula, we're changing the future. Why? How do we know he didn't invent the thing? It's like you can. I think my read on it, and by the way, this is going to be like, you're not going to get a completely solid answer on, like, can the past be changed or not, because it's a, like, seemingly, like, but by the way, I'll just say this will not be the last time they attempt to do this. So
Yeah.
and so it's a question of, like holding on to the hope of, you know um even if the universe tells you that, maybe gives you seemingly an answer to that question, is that going to stop you from continuing to try? And then ultimately, as maddening as it may be, in my opinion, the show kind of does not definitive answer. It's actually quite ambiguous. I won't go into it any more than that, but, like, but it's really interesting the way they do it. I I choose to look at this show's view on time travel in a sort of different way than, on the surface. I think many people could look at the way it operates in the show and say the past is set, you can't change anything. Um, but Claire clearly has an effect on the past. And so you can either look at that as things are set in stone, or you can look at it as these characters, go through pain and suffering and attempt to do things, and strive with all their might and passion, and they have great effect on the things that happen. Um, it just so happens that was in keeping with history, and the fact that they were always a part of these events, in that way. And so, I think it's much more complicated than simply the past is immovable. And like I said, like, that is not like a set answer either. Like, I think the show still leaves that incredibly up to debate, and it's very hard to talk about without talking about future events. And we can have a much more sort of nuanced discussion about this once we make it through the entire show. But I do think it's fascinating the way the show seems to give you answers, but then makes you doubt them, and, like, yeah, and it's very, like, it's very thought provoking,
Yeah.
and ultimately, I think it's something that fans will continue to discuss over the years in relation to the show.
Yeah, and I like that perspective, because I tend to not enjoy as much, the rule time travel stories where it's made clear, like, nope, the past is set ironclad, everything that happened was always supposed to happen that way, and basically characters actually have no choice or agency. They are just puppets on a string playing things out, because one of the most important things in any story is a character's choice and their ability to, change, set their own future, for better or worse. And I do think that this show is showing us that, like, as you said, Claire is having an effect on the people around her, and, like, whether or not it was always meant to be that way, like, she is influencing people, like, she is, having, and that means that her life and her choices matter, as do Jamie's and everyone's. I just have a feeling that, if I can borrow a story from, maybe not a time travel, but Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I get the sense that something like the Battle of Culloden is basically like a canon event, and it's like that is a touchstone that, like, because it's the culmination of, like, thousands of people like making their choices to wind up there. I'm like, that is something that might be a little ambitious for Claire and Jamie to think that they can truly change. It's kind of like, if you think of time travel as like a river, for instance, like time is a river, you throw a rock into the river, you cause a ripple effect like on the water around it, but then the river self-corrects. You have to throw a pretty damn big boulder into the river to actually change the course.
I think there's also the viewpoint you can take that actually they succeed in changing the past. They've just haven't been aware. Claire has never been aware of the other version of events because she was living in a world that was already affected by her choices when she goes back in time. Because I think you can definitely argue that, and we can talk about this more fully when the season ends, that Jamie and Claire might have ended up possibly weakening the rebellion through their actions in this season. And if they had done nothing, maybe things would have been different.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually. Like the fact that they basically spend the season, essentially trying to ruin poor Prince Charles Stuart's ambitions because they think they're doing a good thing for the people of Scotland and preserving the Highlander culture, but fate and time is a double-pointed, a stick, and if you poke it, it has a tendency to poke you back, and it might be that, as you said, there was some unintended consequences where, as you said, if they had just let that like wine deal go through, maybe Bonnie Prince Charlie does get his father back on the throne of England and things look very different. But that's what makes it so fun, is the essentially the kind of the what if quality of it all. So yes, this is the timey-wimey stuff, as Doctor Who fans would say, is definitely meant to be, deliberately ambiguous in that way.
Like the whole thing with like Neo knocking over the vase, and what's really going to drive you crazy is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't have said anything? That whole thing. So yeah, you drive yourself crazy thinking about that, and I think that's one of the sort of very interesting things about the approach to the whole time travel thing in the show, is that at no point do you get definitive answers on what the rules actually are, or why things unfold the way they do. So yeah. So now I want to go on to just we're talking about sort of we've talked about the time travel aspect and like the changing of the attempts to change the past, but what was your response to just the setting of the season?
I mean, it was just so much fun because, one, 18th century France, you're going to get some amazing costumes and some colorful personalities. And it's such a deliberate contrast from the very beautiful aesthetic of the first season, where, it's the wild Scottish moors and highlands and these people who are much closer to the earth, and like their clothing and their approach and their philosophy, although their politics are quite similar, I think, as Claire says. But what really struck me is the fact that basically the only holdovers that we have from season 1 here are Claire and Jamie and Murtaugh, and we don't get Dougal, we don't get Colm, we don't get Jenny, we don't get Galus, who is not dead, and I suppose Blackjack Randall is a holdover too, but he shows up later.
And the Duke of Sandringham.
Oh, and the Duke of Sandringham. How could I forget the Duke of Sandringham? He's so but what really struck me, as I said, was I actually really didn't miss any of those characters. Not that they're great characters, but just the touchstones that we have, and the new characters that we meet almost immediately, I was just really taken with as well, whether it was characters like as mentioned, the Prince Charles Edward Stuart, or Master Raymond. God, he's great. Or the absolutely delightful Louise, who was just I really loved her, and
like her first scene in the show with the waxing is just like I was dying. It was so.
That second episode had two scenes where, like, one, the wax on wax off scene with where Luis gets her Brazilian, even though they don't call it that in this area, and then there also the public shitting of one King Louis XV, where I was just like, are we really doing this? Only in France does the king need an audience to shit. Yes, and yes, and I love the fact that, like, like, again, the French have very different attitudes about sex and these types of things than the people of Scotland. And I love the fact that Louise was just like putting it all out there to marry a scandalized whore, and Claire is kind of impressed. She's like, because I did find, again, Louise to just be like such a ray of of fun.
And then the French royalty, like, bearing all.
Yeah.
And Myrtle's reaction.
Oh yes. It reminded me very much of certain moments in Game of Thrones where it's like, Murtaugh's gotta have a wife too, and guess what? He finds one with Suzette, which it's like, let Murtaugh fuck, he deserves it too. But then obviously there are other characters who are King Louis XV. Like, I really got a kick out of him because this sounds reductive to say about the King of France, but he's so French. That guy, it was such a joy. And then there's characters like the Comte de Saint Germain, who is a little bit more of a less fun hang, but surprisingly, by the end, can I say that I actually felt bad for the guy? Like, he really just wanted to sell his wine, and Claire and Jamie keep mussing it up.
Oh, don't worry. You'll go back to not pitying him at all with some future information.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No. I mean, I never got the sense that he was a good guy, but like when just later in the season when they steal his wine again and they fake the smallpox, and then he basically finds himself in a situation where Claire is being his judge, jury, and eventual executioner, and I'm just like, this guy cannot catch a break from. No wonder he's like, I'll see you in hell.
Yeah. And really, I mean, like, okay, like, I get, you are right. Like, where he ultimately ends up is kind of, I don't want to say I have sympathy for him, because, like, he is not a good person, and honestly deserves what's coming to him. But at the same time, like, I'm not cool either with like someone, no matter how despicable, dying at the hands of the French royalty for the superstition of practicing the black arts and stuff. And like it's just like he gets handed a raw deal in that sense. And especially because, like, he gets poisoned by Master Raymond. You know, like, that was not a fair move. And like, and he gets caught in that moment, which is so, like, the actor Stanley Weber just does such a great job playing that, where he's like, he is caught and there is nothing he can do to get out of it. And so the only thing that's left is just to say, fuck both of you, and I'll see you in hell.
Yes.
So yeah, like, really good character, excellent villain. But he's an awful person, so like he did deserve a gruesome death. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of like that's a bad hand.
Yeah, it is a bad hand, and as you say, like I know he's a bad guy. It's just that like by the end, I'm like, this dude he just keeps getting handed L's, and then at the end he takes the biggest L of all. But yeah, and then just to touch on like the like another character who is a very good presence throughout the season, Mother Hildegard, played by the great Frances de la Tour. She was another kind of ray of light, and then as a ray of darkness, as a another character who whose presence I really enjoyed, even though he's a little scary, is Monsieur Forez, the royal executioner who spends his free time volunteering and taking care of the poor and the sick. So you're like, maybe this guy isn't so bad. And then even though he's an executioner, and then you're like, oh no, maybe he has. I think he enjoys his line of work more quite a lot, and he might have other interests.
Time, like I thought it was really interesting because he clearly, warns Claire
Yes.
about what's awaiting Master Raymond. So like, so I don't think he's like some heartless, like guy who just like, yeah, maybe he gets a little bit of perverse pleasure out of his job, but like he's also like, he's going to try and warn, somebody if it's, I think he recognizes that it's kind of all like the reason why these people are being arrested is bullshit, but he's still going to do his job. But yeah. And like, speaking of Master Raymond, like, oh my God, I love him so much. And like, and there were just so many things I picked up about his character this time through. I'm going to say like, and again, I want to avoid like spoiling anything, but like this season in retrospect ends up being one of the most consequential chapters of this entire story. There are foundations laid here that have some of the effects come soon and some of them come very far off. And like, it's just amazing because I remember at the time watching these episodes, like they were just so much fun to watch and also heartbreaking. And it just felt like such a unique section of the show because of the setting, which is not to say there aren't other unique settings, but France is a very, particular flavor for the show. And so I always looked at it with great fondness, but there are just, the introductions of like, characters who will have immense importance, and some of the characters won't appear very often and others will. And it like, but I think so much of what transpires in this season just has such far reaching, implications for what follows in the show. And Master Raymond is one of those. I'll spoil ever so slightly by saying like he won't ever have this much of a presence in the show again, but it's not the last we've seen of him either. Like you may have to wait a while, but like so like it's just really interesting. And also I like that, like I'm interested like how much you picked up on Master Raymond besides him just being a really fun character, because I think there are sort of clues embedded in the season about that there's a bit more to him than perhaps meets the eye. And I just wonder like how much of that registered with you.
I got the sense, kind of like was ultimately revealed about Galus in season 1. I'm like, I think this dude is also a time traveler. He seems like he has been around the block more than just the streets of Paris in the 18th century. And I I don't know anything about like how that comes to pass or what time is he originally from or what influence he has, but like just even certain like choices that they made with the like certain objects in his shop, and like I really loved like him having like the dinosaur skull there, and for instance, and his like kind of interest in, you know, what would be considered like the arcane art, but in many respects is, you know, science to, you know, a lot of other people. So yeah, I'm very delighted to hear that that this is not the last we've seen of him. And also the connection that he shared with Claire is just like one of the best, you know, friendships I think we've seen in the show. Like it was so honest and moving, and in particular, like the scene where he comes to her as she's, you know, suffering from puerperal fever and dying, and he's the one who saves her life with a combination of medical knowledge, but also it seems like there's a spiritual component to it as well, and like and that was really beautiful.
I don't want to raise your hopes too much, because like I said, he will never have the presence like he did this season. But it's kind of like almost like kind of like what we get in the Song of Ice and Fire books with what's the character's name? That's from oh God, what's the city Danny goes to?
Quaith in Karth.
Yeah, kind of like that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that. Um, but yeah, no, the line that stuck out to me with him was, you know, when he's talking to Claire and he takes her like in the back of his shop and he says, you know, I have an interest, you know, for things, you know, out of time or something like that. And I was like, oh, I see you.
Yep. I heard like the little ka-ching sound effect when he said that line. I'm like,
Yeah.
mark that. That's a significant line.
And that there seems to be something mystical about him. You know, because Claire is on the edge of death, you
Yeah.
know, at the end of the season. And whatever he does heals her, and you know, and so like I don't know if I registered at the time like how sort of like um I don't think I sort of allowed my thoughts to go very far into the supernatural, but like it's clearly something that's, you know, not of this world, you know, and so um and it's really fun to sort of go for me to go back and sort of pick up on these things just because of, you know, now having the knowledge of the entire series, and you know, being able to put like sort of place proper emphasis on, you know, things that happen, you know, in the early seasons. So yeah, no, I love him, and he's just such a fun character. Um and you know, and I like that, like he's also someone who like you're not entirely sure if you should, you know, Claire has her doubts about how trustworthy he is, because you know, he seems to you know, he says he's enemies with the comp, but you know, but then they, you know, have moments of, you know, uh you know, where they intersect, and she's like, why were you talking to him? And he tried to poison me. Did you help him? Um, and I think by the end of these episodes, it's quite clear that yes, they are enemies. He kills him. So, but I like that there was some ambiguity placed there, because otherwise he's such a lovable character that, like, you know, he's just one of those characters that you just love the moment he pops up on screen.
Yeah, no, the actor Dominique Pignon, I thought
Yeah,
did a really great job. Yes, and I love, like you said, that there's clearly some element to him that, as I said, is like mystical or spiritual, because there is the medical component of him saving Claire's life, where like she diagnosed, like she basically has a retained part of the placenta that wasn't, passed out with the baby, and it's infected and it's killing her. And there is a moment where I think we can see. Master Raymond reach into her womb and pull that infected piece of the placenta out. So like that's like the medical thing that he does, but all of the like the hand motions and like the chanting and stuff like is what actually seems to get her better, like almost immediately, because removing that piece of the placenta would ultimately is removing the source of the infection, but it's not gonna make her better like that. Clearly there
yeah.
was something else that he did.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of like pay attention to some details in the dialogue of that scene, because he talked about recognizing something you know uh similar between them, and there's a mention of colors that people have, and like blue lights, and and these are things you might be wise to keep in the back of your head.
Will do.
And yeah, no, so that was great. And yeah, Mother Hildegard, is wonderful. I always love seeing Frances Del Toro, like in absolutely anything. A lot of people know her from the Harry Potter
Yeah.
films, and pretty much a lot of like British television, and and like she's just so wonderful. And yeah, I loved her presence in the season, and she's such a calming presence. And like I sort of like that she's a little bit like she has some healthy skepticism of Claire, like early on. Um, but then like she recognizes her skill, and the fact that her heart is in the right place of wanting to help people, and then you just feel this connection between the two. And yeah, and I do like that, even though like I didn't love Claire and Jamie getting into their argument about her spending time in the hospital, but I like that um like when Murtaugh says, I know someone who can translate this, but you're not gonna like it. And then he ends up going to Mother Hildegard, and it's like, okay, it was a good thing that you were here.
Yes. No, I mean she is obviously she's a woman of many talents, and very perceptive. And yes, I love the fact that like she's not just like the strict Catholic nun archetype that we could have again seen in a different story. She she it has a she has a connection to the king, and she also like she's a musical prodigy, and she is very knowledgeable about healing for her time. So
Her mentions of Herr Bach, and
yes,
you
that,
know
that that was a nice touch too, where it's like that was one of those moments where the show was definitely doing a little winking at us, where it's basically like the fact that like Johann Sebastian Bach's Goldberg variations are one of the most instantly iconic and recognizable pieces of music in the world. And of course in the time they're like, who's this guy, what's he ever done, he's not going to amount to anything. And you're like, oh, just you wait.
yeah, and it's not the sort of piece to be remembered. No heart, and it's like, oh god, like that. Just also that it feels to me like it did get modern critics,
Yeah.
or even more so like uh, you know, film Twitter.
Yeah, yeah. Which
So yeah,
Film Twitter deserves all the digs. So get them in there.
yeah,
Even though I don't know if Film Twitter really if it was what it was when this show came out. But again, this show has time travel in it, so maybe it had a premonition.
yeah, exactly. Oh god. Yeah. Okay, let's we mentioned him, but let's talk about Charles Stewart, the Bonnie Prince.
Yeah. No, I understand, like, because this is a character who's been depicted before in lots of media, and like I think other portrayals of him have made him out to be a little bit more of like, a romantic hero, a guy, leading a doomed cause for a for a cut for his country. But it's also like this. I think that this show manages to make it clear, like, those legends are built on stories and things, because like this guy is, Murtaugh calls him Italian because he's never set foot in Scotland in his entire life. He doesn't have a Scottish accent, and but I also found again that like the show very easily could have treated him as a joke, but they found a way to imbue pathos into him with basically thinking about the fact that this guy, from the moment he has been born, has basically been entrusted with this near impossible task and has been told that it is God's will and God's mission that he and his family be restored to the British throne. And what a weight that would have to be for someone who doesn't know if they have it in them to do it, but like all they have is that faith and that belief. And like those were moments where I really felt for the character, even when like Jamie and Murtaugh were clearly like less than impressed with him, and I'm like, yeah, like I think I get why they see like this guy isn't it, but I also again appreciated the show like made him an actual human character with that kind of tragic quality to him, as opposed to just look at this silly fop. Like, it's one of those things that again the show does better than I think a lesser story would have.
Yeah, I think he's like, I hear what you're saying, but I also hear like there is definitely a fair amount of like he is a complete buffoon as well. Um, but as you say, like there's a lot of reason behind that. Like it's when you get told growing up, it's not too dissimilar from what we see in Game of Thrones with someone like uh, Viserys, who, has much more of a, psychopathic, streak through him and, a desire to hurt people. But it's like when you grow up, like saying that, the people await your return and,
Yeah.
and it's sort of ordained that you will, come in with basically fire and blood and and take back the throne. It's not something that he can be entirely blamed for because it's been
Yeah.
placed upon him. So, um, I'm talking about, uh, you know, Charles, not Viserys, who,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fine blaming him for everything and anything and everything. But yeah, and then you got stuff like um, his relationship, uh, with
With Louis, is it Louise?
Louise.
Louise, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to like. I have the character list up, but there's so many damn characters in Outlander that it's kind of hard to go through them all. Um, so like, and I think that like allows us to see like, into the man. He's a bit of a fool for getting entangled in that situation, but like, but when you're raised as a prince, this is, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but like you kind of feel like you can do what you want. And so he's not so worried about the consequences in a way that she has to be.
Yeah.
And
Um, Yeah, I really like, even though we don't get a lot of those two together, like I have fun imagining their relationship dynamic because they are so different. And you know, as you said, Louise seems like the type of character who has like a lot of love for to go around. So I'm not surprised that, you know, she won Bonnie Prince Charlie's affections. I also freaking love the line where so she announces that, you know, she confides in Claire that she has a baby, and Claire's like, well, just pretend it's your husband. She's like, sleep with my husband, but my lover would be furious. And,
It's great. She's being completely genuine. That's just what
yeah,
makes it so absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
Another fun moment with her was just like, you know, and obviously this like in retrospect, this conversation is very like sad when you have the events that follow, but that initial scene where it's Claire, Louise, and Mary, and Mary's like, I don't want to end up with a Frenchman, and you know, I've heard what they do,
yeah.
and just her complete inexperience and the way Louise is just bursting out laughing.
Yeah, it's like I said, Louise has a darker, you know, like, you know, she definitely is a woman of her class and her time. Like, there's also
Yeah,
the moment where she essentially like sharing gossip, and Claire tries to, you know, bring the conversation to more serious matters, and then she's basically like, it's clear that, you know, Louise is not ready for that conversation, but she does have affection for Claire, and I do think that her, you know, she has a little bit of tough love for Mary in that scene where as you mentioned, like Mary's basically like, you know, where I come from, men don't do that. And Lisa's like, where are these men from? The moon? This is she's figured out how to as they say, like, use what she has in order to earn her place in, you know, the society. And obviously she is kind of trapped by that, by the social conventions. But I did, like I said, find that her like the fact that, you know, she comes to see Claire after Claire has gone through that
yeah,
ordeal, and is, you know, the one who kind of finally convinces Claire that you need to, you know, let the nuns take your baby, because, you know, she's not here anymore. And like, that's something that, like, if she was truly as shallow as she sometimes plays on TV, that was not something she needed to do. She did it because she had a real
yeah.
affection for
When
Claire.
she says it is time, yeah, that just broke my heart.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, like you said, it goes to show like how, you know, much she did care for Claire, and um, yeah, I think yeah, she's played by Claire Sermon,
Yeah.
who I think is probably one of my favorite characters of the season, and it's a shame that we actually don't get to see her again throughout the series. I think she's mentioned once later on in the show, but um, so there's a sense that she's like continuing on in the world of the show, but we don't actually get to see her, which I think is a shame. But that is sort of what makes this section of episodes like so wonderful. Is it's almost like this little, even though like I said, the events of it have very far-reaching ramifications. It does feel like its own like little contained, you know, story that is so different from anything else we get in the show, and that includes the characters. So yeah, I you know really enjoyed that. And let's shift. There's some other like supporting characters that I wanted to get to, but let's shift the focus back over to Claire and Jamie for a while, because they go through a lot over the course of this season, even before we get to the finale. Um, just sort of their difficulties in coming back to one another. Um, you know, where it seems like they're doing okay at first, but Jamie is decidedly not okay. He's still very much dealing with, you know, everything he went through in the final episodes of season one. Um and so, you know, they're not really able to be intimate with each other, and that's, you know, becomes a sort of roadblock in their relationship, there's, a degree of frustration there, which is understandable. And I just thought it was great because it showed them kind of like, growing apart a bit, and the fact that, like, their sort of common cause throughout these episodes is like, we're on this mission and we're going to do it, but Claire is not feeling like fulfillment in sort of playing the role of just, being in support of, of the actions. Like, Jamie's out doing all this sort of political stuff, and she begins to feel a bit, without purpose, and hence why she goes to start working in the hospital, which then serves to sort of, drive a bit more of a wedge between them. And so it's like, it's the, we've we see this type of thing often, where the creators of the show are like sort of subtly driving the characters emotionally a part of it before, like, sort of bringing them back, and like, to make us, earn those moments when they're, emotionally and physically close. And so, like, there's lots of ups and downs with them this season.
Yeah, no, I really appreciated how the show. I never once doubted that Claire and Jamie still, were very much deeply in love with one another. But it shows that, as is true in life, sometimes that love isn't always enough to overcome either trauma or, difficult circumstances that one finds yourself in. And like, they made this incredibly brave choice to be together, and especially when, Claire kind of helped bring Jamie out of the absolute pit of darkness that he was in at the end of season 1. But as you said, that darkness is still lingering, it's very real. Like the nightmares that he has, like where it seems like he and Claire are being intimate, and then it's revealed that it's actually a nightmare, and Claire turns into Black Jack, and we get the sense that this is happening every night. And he is, he's a man who is trying essentially to find purpose, in this world, because he believes, that Jack Randall died, and it's one of those situations where he is like, he's actually upset about that because he thinks, now I don't have a chance to kill that man for what he did to me. And so when Claire ultimately reveals to him that Black Jack is alive, and he has that kind of paradoxical reaction where he's like, this is great, you've just given me this gift, now I get to kill the bastard. And Claire almost immediately has to start, trying to steer him away from that again, because she thinks that Black Jack has to live for at least another year before they to conceive the child with Mary. But it's devastating to Jamie that, like, he feels like he can't essentially, rely on Claire for that support, because I mean, there's a great scene that I understand this passage might be from the book, which neither one of us have read, but when Jamie gives that speech where he says, it was this place inside me, a place everyone has inside, a fortress where the most private part of you lives, your soul, that bit that makes you yourself and nobody else. But after Wentworth, it was like the fortress had been blown apart. That's where I've been ever since, Claire, naked, alone, trying to hide under a blade of grass. And which is, it's a beautiful way to describe what was essentially the horrific trauma that we witnessed in detail at the end of season 1. And then when she eventually does come to him in kind of that beautiful scene where they finally do, make love again, and, she kind of guides him through it. And then when it's over, he turns to her and said, remember, I told you I was lost. Well, I think perhaps you've built me a lean-to at least, and a roof to keep out the rain. And that is, again, just a gorgeous piece of writing, and very, very well performed by Sam Heughan and Katrina Balfe. But Claire also has essentially this burden that she, as you said, is struggling with, because, she has made the choice to stay in this time to be with Jamie, but she is still, a modern woman of the 20th century, and she is not going to be happy just, holding court with Louise and sharing gossip about the love lives of the various people of the court. Like, she needs to feel useful. And so when she, goes to, work at the hospital, it's a good thing, ultimately, we know. But it does ultimately put stress on their relationship, understandable stress that, she's putting herself at risk. And it does have consequence, because like, it's not her fault truly, but by the end of the season, when you're seeing that, how hard she's pushing herself and knowing how advanced she is at the pregnant, like, that's when I really started to get the sense, like, if she does not slow down, something terrible is going to happen. And then of course the circumstances that lead to her ultimately having the placental abruption that leads to her baby becoming stillborn. It's like, it's one of the hardest things that any couple in the world can go through, is the loss of a child like that, a child that they never even had a chance to know. So as you said, it's a testament to the strength of their relationship. They're able to get through that, and we can talk about their final reconciliation at the end. But just, I appreciated that the travails that they went through in this season all felt like honest and earned, without ever making it feel like maybe these two characters don't love each other anymore. Clearly they do.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like, I did kind of like, it is like both funny and frustrating, the fact that like Claire is like a woman out of time, and so the fact that Jamie doesn't completely understand why she's so upset when he's like been using one of the brothel to like sort of train himself to be able to like, touch someone without, um without thinking of blackjack. And like, I'm like, oh Jamie, what are you doing? What have you done? And like, she's very understandably freaking out. And I just like, I was like, Jamie, you blockhead.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie still has a lot to learn about,
Yeah.
Claire, the modern woman, which also reminds me of another brilliant moment of comedy when after we witnessed Luis, getting her Brazilian wax, it's revealed Claire decided she wanted to get one too, and when she, maybe to spice things up, and when Jamie is, they're lying in bed together, and Jamie puts his hand down between her legs and realizes that she's now shaven down there, and he's like, "What is this?"
You've done, Tessa.
And I love the bit when he actually goes and takes a look at it, and he says it's more complicated than it looks thatched over, and it's like, oh, too true. you are learning indeed, Jamie Fraser.
Yes, the sentiment that I think, any many a young boy who saw certain things for the first time can attest to a similar shocked reaction. But yeah, no, that was great. And uh yeah, no, and I just enjoyed, like, also, we've talked a lot about sort of the darkness of, what they go through, but then there's so many wonderful moments of light too. I just absolutely love when they're going to Versailles, and Claire, you know, designs this gorgeous dress, but that is a bit too revealing for James. And it's like, it's that sort of stereotypical moment where, the woman comes, down the stairs in a beautiful dress, and like, you start off thinking, Jamie's just having this reaction of, oh my God, you look good. But no, what he's actually saying is like, eh, you know, I forget what are his actual words. Oh, are you mad? And it's just so great. And the way that he hits Murtaugh when Murtaugh's staring too.
Yeah, well, Murtaugh's going to have other stuff to stare at later, but I also
Yeah.
I love the fact that she's like she has the little fan, and she uses that to cover up, and he's like, you're going to need a bigger fan.
Yeah.
That was good. But this is I'm kind of sad we don't have Heidi on this stream with us because I love to hear her talk about this dress. It's fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, and to just address that, I actually, anybody wondering why on earth isn't the most qualified person to talk about the Outlander, costumes on the stream. I actually did reach out to Heidi because I didn't want to presume that she was going to come on for every one of these streams because I know she hasn't actually seen the entire show. So I sort of left it up to her. I didn't hear back for this one, but if she's interested in any future stream, she is more than welcome, and we would love to have her on. But yeah, like this section of episodes in particular, like I can only imagine how she'd be going on about them because the costumes are just breathtakingly gorgeous. Yeah, I don't have pictures for all the dresses in the Versace. A certain one I could not show on the stream, let's say. Again, I want to highlight like Murtaugh's reaction to that revealing dress because it's like the whole season thus far he's been just like bagging on Paris and the French and like everything, but he seems quite happy with the culture in that particular moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was hilarious. And Versailles is also where we run into a couple people. We've got Monsieur Duvernay, who
Oh yeah, he's another kind of quite the character.
yeah.
I freaking it's a simple sight gag, but I love the fact that like they're trying to find this guy essentially to get his help with their plan to disrupt the Jacobite funding, and then Claire finally is introduced to him, and he thinks that she's interested in him romantically, and is quite surprised when he is like, oh, we're going to go over here and fool around, and then Jamie pops in and immediately, understandably, shoves the guy out, and then she's like, "That was the guy we needed to get his help." But fortunately, he seems to recognize that he stepped over a line, and actually, he and Jamie kind of develop a little, bromance over chess.
One of my favorite lines later on is when they're playing chess and then Jamie goes into talking about the politics, and so he's like, hey, Jamie, if you want to ask me a favor, you might consider letting me win one of these games. I respect you too much to do that. I give you permission to respect me a little less.
Yes. And eventually, I think he does win a game, but it's because Jamie's distracted. But yeah, it's a great dynamic between between those two. And yeah, also one of those classic, he very like it reminds me of the like all these characters are wearing like these ornate wigs, and then when he takes his off, you realize that like he actually doesn't look like that.
But I just love that when Louise comes over and says, a friend of mine, Madame Fraser is looking for you, the red dress. He's like, the red dress. It's like she's become this mythical creature within like 5 minutes of being at the party. So, which also, since I just mentioned that, she takes on another mythical reputation in these episodes called Madame Blanche, the White Lady.
La Dame Blanche, yes, yeah. She's a mythical figure in certain circles.
Which seems to be a misunderstanding, but just say maybe in the future something else will come of that. We'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, I enjoy the fact that Claire, obviously she picks up this, this title because of, her actions on the dock where she correctly like diagnoses smallpox and gets herself on Comte Saint Germain's shit list. But then she leans into it at various points in the season where she even though, as she points out correctly, like when because the story starts to get out because Jamie shares that story at the brothel when he's trying not to have the women climb all over him, and she's like, after everything we went through with the witchcraft trial last season, you didn't think it was a bad idea to tell people your wife was a witch, and he's like, good point. But then by the end, she in order to get what she wants from Louis, she's basically like, yes, I am La Dame Blanche, and I have this power, and she uses it to her advantage in many ways.
Yeah, I love that, and yeah, and okay, so and going back to Versailles, like and we mentioned him already on the stream, but like someone else she runs into is our old friend, the Duke of Sandringham, Mr. Simon Callow, which like I knew he was going to be in the episode because he's credited in the opening credits, and I was like, oh yay. It's just so much fun, whenever he appears, even though he's so awful.
Yeah.
And like, especially in this scene where he takes so much pleasure in watching Claire learn that Blackjack is still alive. Because they got this, this back and forth where like one of them gets like one over on the other, and so and I think she thinks that like she's got him on the back foot in that scene, and then that bomb gets dropped and you can just see the glee on his face. So he's so awful, but he's so much fun too.
Yeah, he definitely has that kind of it's a reminder that he is actually kind of he's playing a political game here. He's in France because he's essentially trying to play both sides of the conflict to make sure that no matter who wins, he will come out with his position and his wealth intact. But that means that even though he can present himself as very friendly and charming and like, oh, who me? Like, I wouldn't dare to get involved with all this such nasty business. He has a ruthless edge to him. And also like, the fact that he basically drops poor Alex Randall and leaves him in the Bastille when he thinks in any way it could reflect poorly on him. And it's a reminder that this guy actually has no loyalty or no principles, whatsoever. He is a completely self-serving creature. And yes, that makes him not the worst character in the show, but certainly far from the best. It's just that when you have an actor like Simon Callow, like getting to play all the fun lines, like when they're witnessing the brawl, and he's like, and I was so looking forward to dessert. You can forget that he's a right bastard.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. I love it whenever, you mentioned when we were discussing last season, and I think it was in the episode the Garrison Commander that takes place, which is basically a bottle episode with Claire amongst the British soldiers and Blackjack, and about the commander's extreme Britishness, and and like I really enjoy it when we get characters like whether it's the Duke or like just being exceedingly British. And there was one moment in the first episode of the season where I was like, there's just this moment where Reverend Wakefield points out the article in the paper about Claire being whisked away by the fairies, and Frank goes, devil take the press. And I'm just like, that is such a British thing to say.
And the great response from the Reverend when he's like, not likely. The devil has standards.
Yeah. And as long as we're referencing that first episode again, I will, just so we get another appearance from the Reverend's, adopted son, Roger, the young boy. Just saying, a second appearance of young Roger. Maybe there's a reason why the show is is
Maybe
planting him in there.
maybe he's going to become a recurring character later. I
Maybe.
know nothing about, but I would assume that like he's being shown for a reason. And but as I said, that actually was a great scene between Frank and Reverend Wakefield, where Reverend Wakefield starts kind of trying to ease Frank into the idea that maybe you can be the father that this child needs, as I have become the father figure to this young boy, and he is talking. He brings up the example of Mary and Joseph and the Jesus, and then Frank's spitting back like I'm fairly certain that I'm not Joseph, and whoever this man that Claire fell in love with is, I'm fairly certain he's not God. So our situation is a little different. But
then he says, I fear the words God's plan are about to emerge from your mouth.
Indeed. But then the Reverend, he does manage to make it about God's plan, and he actually he gets Frank to see it in the light when he talks about, essentially this is what that boy needs. And I do love the fact that when Frank goes to talk to Claire later, and he basically lays out the condition that if we're going to resume our life together, we will raise this child as ours. And she says like it's a lie, but like and it would be a lie, but he says like, no, a child would have a father, a real man who she can touch and feel again, not the ghost of a man she can never reach. And that actually is a very compassionate thing, because I actually do, I know nothing, but I actually get the sense that Frank will be a good father to Jamie and Claire's daughter, just because he is the kind of man who, it seems like, when he makes that commitment, he will keep it.
Yeah, and speaking of all that, there's a scene between Jamie and Claire where once he sort of comes down from his anger about the fact that she is the fact that she asked him basically to spare Blackjack for the sake of Frank, and he reveals to her later on that like the real reason he's going to do that is because he greatly fears that no matter what they do, they may still find themselves on Culloden Moor, and if something should happen to him, that he wants her to take to go herself and take their child back to her time and to Frank, so they'll be safe. And which is just so full of foreboding, because we know that that she ends up returning, and yeah, it's just like one of those horrible things where like, as she's promising this, she just hopes and prays to God that that's never going to come to pass, and we as the audience know that it actually is. And yeah, it's just got so much tragic weight about it, which is so great. And yeah, I mean, not great for characters, but like, it's great drama.
Yeah. No, and like you said, that essentially, that the reasoning why Jamie ultimately agrees to follow Claire's wishes and not kill Blackjack, and he reveals it's actually not so much because of they're keeping score with the promises of who saved who, how many times, and who owes it each other, but just because he loves her that he's doing this, and because he wants her to be safe, even if she can't be with him. And the fact that that's hanging over the entirety of the show when Claire, we don't know exactly how she winds up going back through the stones yet, or at least I don't, but like when one of the first things that she's doing after she is sent back through the stones is she basically accosts that poor guy who's only trying to help and is like screaming at him who won the battle at Culloden Moor, and he's like, Cumberland and the British, get off me. And then just the way she collapses in agony because of what she realizes that presumably she believes Jaime died there. And so yeah, I get the sense that if there are eight seasons of the show, that Jaime probably did not die at Culloden Moor, but she doesn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, but she's going to live with that knowledge, whether it's true or not, for a long time, because we already see within the course of these episodes that, at the very least, up until the moment that, Brianna grows up to be, how old is she, like 5 or 6?
Yeah, about that age.
Yeah, and so like that in of itself demonstrates that this is not going to be like a quick fix, whatever happens in the future. So like, and I sort of like that it's what makes, and we can talk about this more when we do the next batch of episodes, but I really sort of, even though I was heartbroken at the time, like I really love that, like the show kind of shows that there's a weight to when there's separation eventually comes, and like it's not something where they just click undo the next season, and this is going to have ramifications, for their lives. And yeah, so in a sense, like these first 2 seasons are basically like their own show, and I won't get into details, but what follows will be a new chapter in the story, uh, and so that is both really sad, but also makes it very nostalgic to go back to watch these early episodes. And so this is a good time to switch gears and talk about a character who I can like. I don't feel like this will be ruining anything, because I think he sort of cements his place that makes it feel like he's going to be a an important character moving forward, but like he's not going anywhere any time too soon, and that is the character of Fergus.
Yes. Actually, his name's Claudel, but we agreed that was not very manly.
Yeah. And I just love Fergus so much, just because just the immediate cementing of the relationship between him and Jaime, and then later on, as we see, in between him and Claire, like this is a young boy who doesn't have anything, and you know and he gets taken into this family, and that's something that you're going to get to see grow and evolve over the course of the show. And um he doesn't have an easy life, as we see in this season, but he's such an endearing character, and I just love the fact that he sort of comes into this as basically an adopted child of Claire and Jaime, and I love his back and forth with Murtaugh in this season. Where they're taking the piss out of each other, and yeah, I just, yeah, I'm trying like not to say too much, because there's so much I want to say about him that'll have impact in the future, um but it's just this, I love stories of found family, and and the story of this young kid who's not living a very good existence, basically growing up in a brothel without, he doesn't have a real family, and the fact that Jamie takes him on and gives him, to start off with the job, but then they grow very close and they have this bond, and I just yeah, it's just a wonderful story, and he's a wonderful little character, and yeah, so uh, again, I just want to stop myself from going on too much because because there's more to say, but like, yeah, he's and I love the young actor who plays him here, because um spoiler alert, we see certain characters at later ages in this show,
Yeah.
and as characters grow. So like, so it was fun for me to go back and see him, the young Fergus in these
Yes.
episodes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely got the sense that he's going to be a major, significant character going forward. But at this age, it's the familiar archetype of like the young street urchin who one of the characters catches trying to steal from them, and then instead of cuffing them on the ear and sending them on their way, they offer them a job and take them in, and they have a chance to grow and evolve. Like, and I did find like Fergus to be a very delightful character whenever he showed up, whether it was bantering with Murtaugh or bantering with Jamie, or the kind of the bond he develops with Claire. As you said, like it does feel like they basically like adopted him as their son, essentially. And that makes it all the more tragic, of what happens to Fergus in this scene. And I will acknowledge when they when Jamie brings him to the brothel and he's like, stay here, and then he starts to wander off to do his like pickpocketing, and I was actively shouting at the screen, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot. And then of course he wanders into the absolute worst room he could wander into, when Randall shows up, and just the horrible thing. We thought Randall couldn't get any worse, but when he looks at Fergus and he said, "You're not what I ordered, but you'll do," and then starts to sexually assault him, and Fergus beating himself up basically not because he was assaulted, although that was a horrible thing to happen to him, but because he screamed out, and it got Jamie's attention, where Jamie, when he sees this happening to this boy, that knowing his own history with Randall, and he's just screaming at him, "You sick bastard," and challenges him to the duel again. And that's the reason he breaks his promise to Claire. It's like, when Claire learns that information from Fergus, and she understands that like it wasn't that revenge mattered more to Jamie than his promise to her. It was that he couldn't stand to see Randall hurting this young innocent kid in the way that he had been hurt, and it was not just a matter of honor; it was a matter of love for this boy. And yeah, it was that was. There was a heartbreaking development, and the young actor who played Fergus, I don't have his name in front of me, but like the way he plays that kind of confession scene to Claire in the final episode of these seven, I just thought he was really, really impressive. And hopefully it's one of those things where this horrible thing happened to him, but maybe like now that he's going to be with Claire and Jamie going forward, hopefully he'll have a chance to move beyond it and live a happier life.
Yeah, he's yeah, his life will go on, and it's not to say that everything's going to be happy. As with a lot of characters, there's going to be rough patches for the character, but yeah, I think it's safe to say he will find his comfort in life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I went ahead and looked up the young actor's name is Roman Barrow, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might be getting that pronunciation right. I yeah, I thought he did a great job. Can you say something, Jared? I'm worried that
No, I can hear you
Uh-oh,
fine.
I've muted myself. Or I've muted the channel. Hold on. Uh, okay, there we go. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, somehow I
Okay.
muted the tab, you know,
Okay.
so I don't know how I did that, but yeah. Um, so yeah, it'll be fun, going along on that journey with Fergus. And yeah, and the yeah, you're right. It's like, I talked at the end of last season about how I think, like viscerally what we see, in those episodes is probably like the most traumatizing thing as an audience member to kind of endure, for the entire show. But in terms of Blackjack's, awfulness, it's certainly not like the end of the road there. And it's like, he's just like, when you see just that there is no like limit to his, you know, just, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is.
Depravity.
Depravity and just, yeah, it's like, and obviously we understand, Claire's, especially when she doesn't have all the information, like her, you know, her wanting to stop the duel from happening. But like, we know that, even though we don't get explicitly told until the next episode what transpired, I think we have an idea, even before that. And it's just like, we want to see, even though we love Frank, we want to see Blackjack get horribly killed. And even though he escapes, his fate once again, at least he is, in, at least he is wounded in a very like cathartic place. Like, I was very happy to see him suffer that wound.
Yeah, it was basically like, this probably is a fitting punishment for this guy who has far worse coming to him and deserves it. We know that he eventually, even though we don't know it yet, Claire has shared with him like the date of his death, and so we know that's coming. But in particular, it was particularly, even though I never, as a man, I never like to see anyone get injured in that particularly sensitive area. In this case, I'm like, for Blackjack Randall, I'll make an exception because that guy probably deserves to be castrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and of course, I remember like there was a whole conversation when this show, when this episode originally aired. I'm like, you know, where I think I had already stumbled onto what you alluded to, that I felt like there was enough evidence already to suggest that, you know, that Alex was the actual ancestor of Frank, but the show has not spelled that out yet. And so there was a discussion like, oh shit, did this, you know, mess up the timeline? Even though Blackjack's still alive, he does not seem that he'll be able to have, father any children at this point. So like, already, like, this is where the show, like, was still sort of toying with that, even though like we've seen Frank in the beginning of the season. But like, but that was still like, I don't think the show had like firmly established sort of what its rules were of like, is what we saw in the beginning of the season immutable, or can that still be altered, or you know um and yeah. uh but as I said, I was pretty certain at this point that Alex was was the ancestor. So it's like, no, it's still all going according to history at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just such a contrast, the fact that like Black Jack Randall and his brother Alex came from the same tree, because as you said, they are two very different characters, and I love the fact that Claire is able to recognize that like she doesn't hold the sins of one brother against the other, and it even though there's the heartbreaking scene where she tries to talk Alex out of uh, wedding Mary, because her true motive in that scene is, again, she thinks to try to protect Mary marrying Blackjack, but also she frames it as essentially affection for Mary and what kind of life he's going to be able to offer her now that he's been dismissed from the Duke of Sandringham's employ, um, and the fact that she, it essentially they'd be living almost a penniless, like pauper like life, and he's basically like, of course I want the best for her, like thank you for your candor. But it's also a sense of like the two it's like these two characters they're clearly in love, they clearly like want to be together, and sometimes like even if you understand why they're doing it, the machinations of to try and uh, uh, figure out essentially how to keep these two characters apart is heartbreaking. Like I thought back to the movie Emma that we both love, the movie 2020, where Emma kind of callously essentially breaks up Mia Goth's character Harriet and her love Robert Martin, and then clearly they're both devastated by it. And there's that scene they come back into each other's orbit, and they're just like obviously pining for each other, and you're just like, come on. But they do eventually, and hopefully Alex and Mary will at least have some time together, because it's also we haven't touched on the fact that the show clearly sets up that Alex is not of the strongest constitution. There is something that is ailing him, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like he's going to live a very long life, but hopefully he and Mary will have at least a little bit of happiness in it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that when we get to the next batch of episodes.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then and we've talked a little bit about Mary, but then there is the events of when they're attacked on the street,
Yeah.
Mary and Claire, and Murtaugh's with them, which this becomes a real sort of big point for Murtaugh, in the sense that he feels responsible for for letting that happen, and and this sort of then aside from just being absolutely horrifying on its own terms, it then sort of spirals and creates a lot of chaos in the evening to follow, which then like it's so amazing how like there were so many things that, I mean, I guess this is the nature of telling a story, but like it's like there were so many things that then unintentionally lead to consequences that then cause the unraveling of something else, and it's like, oh god, if like a different decision had just been, like a different action or decision had just been made along the way, that could have been some pain that was saved. But yeah, it's a real like that's really a horrifying sequence, and it's something that hasn't fully been resolved either. Like, I think a really important, thing to note is that when we get to the end of the season and the Comte Saint Germain confesses to trying to poison Claire, he seemingly leaves out any information or confession about the attack on the street. and could be that we don't know the whole story there.
Yeah, I get that. Like that was one of the things where it struck like they're pinning this on the Comte de Saint Germain because they're already enemies with him. He seems to have motivation. It makes sense that they would think that he's behind this. But it's probably one of those things where even though he was, he had done plenty wrong, like this was something that he was actually being honest about when he's basically like, I know nothing about what you're talking about with this. And they just kind of brush over it. But it might be that he was telling the truth there, and there's another villain out there who is actually responsible for this horrific attack on Mary.
Just to cover myself there, I don't remember if he could still be that he was involved somewhat, but I just don't think that but it's not the whole story. So I don't remember. It's been a while since I've actually seen these episodes. So yeah, but I will say that I think these episodes kind of lay the groundwork for we don't know everything. And so yeah, that's that'll leave some more for the future. So yeah, I think that kind of leads us into the events of the final episode.
But before we do that, I just want to because we don't need to talk about this character long, but I realize we haven't mentioned him yet, and he shares my name. I'm like, I want to shout out the actor Robert Cavanaugh, who plays Jamie's cousin Jared Frazier. He's only in the first episode, but surprise, I really liked that character, and I liked, I don't know if he'll be coming back in future seasons or not, but I really like that they have to kind of win him over with basically their commitment to the Jacobite cause. And I love the fact that Jamie uses his scars, which he was being used as like a prop by Dougal all throughout season 1, and this time he does it voluntarily as a way to get in Jared's good graces. And Jared, when he sees that, he's like, I'm sorry I doubted you, brother. Like, clearly you are committed to this cause, and please have the run of my house and run my wine business for me while I go off to the West Indies. And I was like, good on you, buddy. Anytime a character with my name shows up in a show, I'm just like, please just don't let them be like an irredeemable asshole. And in this case, bar passed.
No, if anything, too trusting.
Yeah,
because I love the fact that it was so interesting to have Jamie then, someone who through his scars was sort of being used, by Dougal, and to then in turn, use that same playbook to manipulate his cousin. And it's played like, if you listen to the music and the way it's played, it's all like played very like for Jared's benefit of being like very like authentic and genuine, and this is why I'm committed to the Jacobite cause, all the while they're basically gonna try to undermine it. And so and Jamie does in the scene before this, when he and Claire are talking about doing this, and he says it's not a very noble path that you're laying out for us. And so he has misgivings about doing this, but Claire convinces him, it's for the greater good. And so I like that, not only does Jared, is gonna help them, but he's leaving his wine business to Jamie so he can go off to his venture in the West Indies, leaving him run of the house, so now it's theirs, and they the servants are going to be loyal to them, and and everything. And I just sort of love the fact that it sort of cracked me up that I guess the implication is that because I thought it was kind of funny that like they don't hide what they're doing from the servants.
Yeah, I do wonder how many of the servants actually like speak good enough English to understand them. But yeah, like they're just talking about it right there in the open, and it's like clearly there's an omerta here that they trust. And I do love the fact that like even though yes, Jared ultimately buys Jaime's explanation. Again, that refrain that Cersei Lannister or that quote about Cersei and Lannister, I love, making honest feelings do dishonest work. I love the fact that like as soon as Jared, shows up, he's basically like, "You're my cousin, like I love you, but like you have to sell me on this Jacobite, commitment. Like I am, he's basically like, I've never known you to be interested in politics." Like, and it's a testament again to Jaime's intelligence that he's able, and his commitment that he's able to fool a man who I think is very, very discerning. And yeah, he's got a pretty sweet bachelor pad up there. I was kind of like, you know what? I think that Jared Fraser is living a good life in Paris. We're probably with a few mistresses on the side. So yeah, I like I said, he's only in one episode, so we don't need to spend much longer. But I was like, if we go through the stream and don't mention him, I'm gonna kick myself. So
fair enough. And I will say we see him one more time.
Okay.
So,
but we were going to talk about the final episode before I distracted you with my namesake.
Which, like I said, totally fair. And I want to start off, going into this by like really just singing the absolute praises of Katrina Balfe. Yeah. Because she has obviously been absolutely phenomenal throughout the entire show, but she rightfully got so much acclaim for this episode, and I just like it tears me up like watching her performance here, especially when we get to the later scenes when we just flashback to her holding Faith, and then when Faith is taken away, and it's just, it was so heartbreaking. And this is, I feel like it's one of the greatest episodes of the entire series.
Yeah, no, I really, in addition to Katrina Balfe's incredible performance, I wanted to shout out the director of this episode is Metin Hussein, who I believe directed one episode of season 1, The Watch. But in this section, he directs, I think, 5 episodes of like all. But he directs 1, 2, and 3, and then he directs 6 and 7. I thought he did a great job making it feel like a kind of like there was a dreamlike quality to this episode. And part of that is because Claire is, feverish and dying after her experience. But also because it captures like what essentially the surreal nature of the moment. Like when a tragedy like this happens where you lose a child in this way, like, and the way that Katrina plays that moment definitely plays into kind of the shock and the disbelief that she has that like she could be carrying this life inside her for almost 9 months, and then all of a sudden she's gone and she's never lived. And Claire in many ways feels responsible for that, and just the shock when they tell her essentially that your baby, she was stillborn, she never lived, and then she is just saying like, then she just almost like resets like and just starts saying over and over again, I want my baby, I want my baby. And even if her baby is dead, like she wants to see it, she wants to hold her, and the way that Metin Hussein kind of holds the camera on her through that scene is it's incredibly heartbreaking and disturbing, because Katrina Balfe is not like being shy, like she's essentially showing us a woman who is utterly emotionally destroyed in this scene. And even when she's also basically saying like, I want my husband, and he's like, your husband can't come, he's in jail. And and she starts to resent him for that too. But but yeah, it was a really powerful, especially that sequence in the hospital. And beautifully, I think the writer of that episode is Tony Graffia, who you said is kind of a staple of the show as well. Yeah. So yeah, this I get why, if you're saying that this is one of the most beloved episodes of the season, a series, even if it's heartbreaking, I can see why. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking up the episodes now because I wanted to see some of the credits because yeah, I also want to like talk about the writing because, you know, as the show kind of continued on, Matthew B. Roberts and Tony Graffia are the ones that kind of took the reins for the show. This is when uh, Ronald Moore started to kind of have a slightly less hands-on, you know, impact on the show, which happens in most shows where you have, you know, the person who kind of spearheads, and then he entrusts, you know, he or she will entrust the show to the people who are going to be the mainstays. You know, we saw that, you know, there's shows like Lost and, you know, and other shows that kind of do that. Um, and so I believe the premiere of the season was written by Ronald Moore, and then we had episode 2 written by Ira Stephen Bear, who is another like, you know, alum of you know, of Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica, and but then you sort of see, you know, other writers starting to come in and take the reins. And we do actually have an episode coming up in the second half of the season that is written by Diana Gabaldon herself, the author of the books. So that's really interesting. And but yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because I feel like this season was a bit of a transition, you know, in terms of like who was sort of overseeing the show. Which is kind of fitting because there's so many different new elements in this season, and then that just continues on to a great degree in season 3. But yeah, it's such a beautifully written episode, and beautifully written and directed, and I always think of that shot of Claire that opens up the episode that is just like while she's, you know, in the hospital, and it's just an overhead shot of her just completely and utterly devastated. You know, and it's just, oh my god, it's so amazing. You know, it's one of those episodes that is just so difficult to watch, but it's also like you're just sort of blown away by the skill, you know, involved in you know, among the actors and, you know, all the people working behind the scenes. So yeah, it's just it's beautiful, and the fact that the episode still manages to have some like, you know, there's so much heartbreak in the episode, to be sure, but there's also some fun and intrigue in the episode as well, particularly when we get to the stuff, you know, with King Louis and the trial. And I love the fact that like that Claire gets in, you know, one of her Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ in this episode, which was so much fun. And then perhaps the most awkward sex scene in the entire show.
Yeah, that was obviously like there. It's like what's happening there isn't great because like I mean it's not assault. Like Claire went into this situation knowing that like she was probably going to have to sleep with the king in order to secure Jamie's freedom. Like Mother Hildegard warned her about that, and she basically has the line like, if that's the case, like I will add my virtue to like one of the many things I have lost here in Paris. But yes, the fact that it seems like, you know, she like when Louis basically like, yes, I can do this for your husband, but like, well, what will you do for me? And she's like, I'm at your complete disposal. And then it seems like, you know, okay, well, he's going to have sex with her. And then it's like, actually, I'm going to have you come and basically serve as the judge in this sham trial that I'm conducting for these two, for Master Raymond and the Comte de Saint Germain, and that gets over with, and Claire's like basically like, all right, was that it? Was that what the favor you need me to do? He's like, no, we're gonna do the, you still have to follow up on your payment. And then when she lies back on the bed, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 thrusts and done, and you're just like, that's it.
She's like,
she barely even had time to get ready for it, and then it was over.
yeah. And I think it's the sort of silver lining is that not only does Jamie get released from the Bastille, but also gets a full pardon, not only in France, but also for his crimes in Scotland, so they can return home. And so, but there's also a sort of indication of like, Claire reveals herself as, fully owning the fact, the idea of being a white witch. And then there's the fact that, Jamie is sort of probably now on Louis' shit list a bit. So there is also the implication, I'm doing this so that you all will leave my country.
Yes.
And so, yeah. But yeah, I know we talked about it a bit, but like that whole trial scene is like, there is like, as dark as it is, like there is some fun to it. And like, I think it's desperately needed in the aftermath of like all the sort of, I say the aftermath, there's more heartbreak to come in like the final moments of the episode, but like there's just so much that weighs down on you through this episode that it's almost kind of as much tension as there is in the trial. It's almost a relief to sort of, go through this, the sort of plots within plots, and, and as we mentioned before, it's just so much fun seeing like, the Comte's sort of reactions to everything, where he's just sort of laughing at the absurdity of the fact that he's being judged now by the person he's tried to have killed.
It's like I've made a mistake. That I should have made some different choices with my life. And yeah, the theater of the trial is very tense and entertaining. From the fact that like Louis, as basically like as they've said, like they've done these type of things before, but this time it seems like Louis actually wants blood. And of course, his executioner, Monsieur Perez, is right there, like looking very menacing. And then they wheel out the Viper, the Gaboon Viper that's in the opening title sequence. And I'm like, I've been waiting for this thing to show up. And then they don't use it. They,
like, Your Majesty, another suggestion.
Yeah, because it's like if we let this snake out of the cage, then yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to save people from this. But yeah, it was and yeah, the sleight of hand that she or the essentially the connection that she shares with Master Raymond, where she brings back the bitter cascara that had been used in the attempt to poison her. That Master Raymond basically sells to anyone who he wants to poison somebody. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to actually sell you poison, but I'll make it look like you poisoned them, and then they just miraculously recovered because of God's will or whatever. That was a nice touch. And the necklace, the fact that like as after he puts it into the the necklace actually does change color, and Saint Germain clocks it.
Just the look on the Comte's, face, like those eyes, like, fuck, I'm screwed.
Yeah, he tries to clock like, can I run? No, I'm in this room. They will catch me. Like, how do I want to die? Like, what is the way to go out with as much dignity as I can muster in this undignified situation? And ultimately, the route he chooses is to drink the poison and basically, as you said, say like, fuck all of you. I will see you in. So again, like not a good guy, but he did have a pretty he went out not quite on his own terms, but at the very least, he staked a little flag that basically says, I do not approve of this. But yeah, and Louis actually becomes like a very menacing character in that scene, because he's been like, again, when we first meet him, he's constipated as hell, and everyone is watching him shit and giving him advice, and Jamie's the one who tells him porridge everyone.
What's so funny about that moment is that, like, you don't even clock exactly what's going on when you first, like, enter the scene, because it seems like he's just sitting down, in some distress, but sitting down, and then you're like, oh, wait a second.
Yes.
And I love all of Murtaugh's commentary about it too.
Yeah.
He's like, only in France would we gather around to watch King take a shite.
Yes. Yeah. Again, Murtaugh's opinion of the French is a great source of humor. We haven't even touched on some of his other best lines, but yeah, the actor who plays King Louis XV, Lionel Winglesare, like I said, such a so French, which makes sense. But I would also, because we haven't talked about this moment yet, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about King Louis's absolute best moment in these episodes, which is when he absolutely gets to cut Blackjack Randall down to.
To say we need to divert for a moment and actually talk about that, because I've left it out. Yeah, just like that whole scene is like so great, from just the moment of when Claire and Eloise are like walking together, and she says there's rather dashing, man, he's looking very intently at you, and then Claire turns around and it's Blackjack, and it's like, and I do want to say, like, I don't want to take anything away from Stanley Weber and and the Comte Saint Germain, because like I said, great villain, but like the moment that Blackjack comes back into the show, it's like, here's our villain, like here's the one that we like love to hate. And I sort of love how, like, it's because obviously Blackjack is the most deplorable excuse for a human being in the world, and he's a monster, but it is sort of fun to watch his like pleasure and amazement in, like, Claire, surely even you can recognize the sheer prosperous nature of us being drawn together, and of all places the French court, and it's like, it's a reminder that, like, Jack can present himself as, like, a gentleman, in the circumstances where it's called for, of, like, he will observe all the niceties, that are expected of him in a situation like this. But that's why it's so absolutely wonderful to see him taken down so brutally by Louis.
It's absolutely like one hit, because again, he's just so menacing, but obviously, like, he can't do anything in the presence of the King of France without causing an international incident. And there's that threat on Jamie's side too, where basically he's like, Jamie won't draw his sword on me here, because to draw a sword in the court of the king is death. But that means that, as you said, he's going to try to play the charmer. But Louis just isn't having any of it. First, Jack tries to speak to him in French, and Louis just mocks his accent. Like, the French language is hard for the English to master. But then he turns to Claire, he's like, but of course, your accent is perfect and flawless. And then when Jamie does enter the scene and he gets to dig in about, like, on Randall's wounds, and he's like, you ran afoul of some sheep, was it? It was cattle, actually. And then when he reveals he's there on a mission of mercy for his brother, and Louis like, perhaps you should beg. And he's like, I beg your pardon? And he's like, yes, beg on your knees. And he makes it clear. He's like, oh, like, I have to do this, like, to save my. I guess I will do it to save my brother, even though I'm hating it because it's humiliating me. And then he finally does go down on his knees, and the movie's like, not now. You English is so literal. And just the way Blackjack is seething, and the way that Claire and Jamie just having a look of absolute, barely concealed delight on their faces. They are loving this. It's so good. It's so good that we get to see Blackjack like taken down in this absolutely brutal way without any, violence whatsoever. Like, because you just know it's like one of those things that like he will carry this slight with him to his grave. He is like, if you were not the king of France, I would kill you now for what you have done to me here. But he can't, so he just has to live with it.
What's just so satisfying is that like the threat that he can exert in this scene is just like the pure sort of emotional turmoil he's putting Claire and Jamie through just being in their presence. And so to see him so just all of that extinguished and have him so ridiculed and embarrassed by Louis is just, and to then see like Jamie and Claire's absolute pleasure at it, it's just, it completely extinguishes his power in the scene, and it's just so satisfying. Yeah. Just like I loved seeing that so much. It was so much fun. And then when but then he will take any opportunity he can to sort of then exert that sort of emotional power over them. Then once the moment has passed, when Jamie goes back to challenge him to a duel, and he takes that moment to put his hand on Jamie's shoulder, and it's like it's that's why like he just deserves to die such an awful, horrible death. And
yeah. Well, I mean, I think he will, and that to his very minimal credit, that we don't actually hear him say this line, but when Jamie tells him that he challenged him to a duel and he accepted, and he said he owed me a death. I was like, that's a good line. Because there's so many ways you could take that. You could take it as like he like, yes, I deserve to die for what I did to you, but also it's like I should have killed you and put you out of your misery. So many years ago.
Well, Jamie asked him to kill him too.
That too.
So there's that dimension to it, and so. But it's also great to see like Jamie, like this is Jamie in a position of power, because now he's he feels free of that the torment that he's been going through, and he has his chance for revenge now, which is why he's like so gutted then when Claire then intervenes and first prevents the duel from taking place by making an accusation against Randall, and then asking Jamie not to go through with the duel, at least not for another year, and that just wounds Jamie so much. He's so hurt by that. So which is probably like a good moment to like, as we sort of wind back over to talking about the finale, is like, I heaped so much praise upon Katrina Balfe, which she rightly deserves, but like, Sam Heughan shares in that, particularly in the final scene of the episode. When he's just standing there and, do you hate me for it, Claire? It's just, he's so good, and it's so heartbreaking. And you got these two characters who were just trying to find their way back to each other. And as Claire says, like, how do we, find our way back? How can we ever be the same? And he's like, we can't be. but they need to go on together and share the weight of what has happened, as he says, like, no one can bear it alone.
Yeah, no, this scene is probably, I think, like the best written scene in the entire these entire section of episodes. Like, just every line from when Jamie comes back into the house, and he and Claire are finally talking, and of course this is interspersed with the flashback scenes of Claire essentially holding and singing to their daughter, and just relaying to Jamie the lines about, like, she was beautiful, so small, I could cup her head in the palm of my hand. The ears stuck out just a little. You could see the light through them, and the light through her skin as well, like a light on a pearl that's still wet from the sea. Her eyes were closed, no lashes yet. They were slanted a bit like yours. She had wisps of the most beautiful copper hair. And, like, these are scenes, Jamie will never get to see this because his daughter's been buried before he ever was released. But it's, and of course we get Claire singing. And then when it cuts back to her and she's like, so yes, I hated you. Emphasis on the past tense there, hated. Applying, she no longer, it said, and she says, but it was me who asked the impossible of you. It was me that put Frank before our family. It was me who followed you to the woods. And he said, Frank is your family too, but he's not here. And now neither is our daughter. It's not your fault. And it's not even Randall's fault. Not this time. It's my fault. Just so good from Katrina Balfe there. And then, as you said, the continuation where Jamie says, like, I asked your forgiveness once. You said there's nothing to forgive. Truth is, I already forgave you long before today for this and anything else you could ever do. And then there's a little humorous aside in there where she's like, there is something else. I slept with the king. And he's like, all right, we're not going to let this derail. It's like, you did it to save my life, just like I gave myself to Randall to save you. And then the beautiful moment where, as you said, how can we ever be the same? No, we can't be. The weight of what has happened here is too much for any one of us to bear alone. The only way we can live with it is to carry it together. And I also love the fact that when she's like, are you sure you want to do that? We lost our child, but by the grace of God, we may be given another. There you go. There's Brianna. And then the beautiful thing where she says, then bring me home to Scotland. And I just love Sam Heughan, the way he almost like lets out that exhale at that moment, like, because he was so worried he was going to lose Claire there. And then, like, when she not only says she still loves him and wants to be with him, but he's like, yes, take me to home, to our home, to Scotland. And he's just, and like, take me home to Lollybrook all over again. And she's and he's like, of course, this is, but there is something we have to do first, which is say goodbye to our daughter. So yeah, this is probably, I think it's in the running for the best scene of the entire show so far for me.
Yeah. And then, yeah, just the final episode at the gravesite, and him leaving one of the spoons, which he had given to Claire, which have been, in their in his family, and if he must be buried. We must bury you in France, and let us leave a bit of Scotland with you. And
so specifically to Saint Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland, which is, yeah, beautiful touch. And like I said, this is why I almost forgot that, like, we still have another half of the season to go, because this feels so much like a season finale, and the way it ends.
Yeah, which is why it was really important for me to make sure that we split the season up. I actually have still not, like, even though I've got, like, it mapped out a certain way on our schedule, I'm still not entirely sure what I want to do with moving forward after this. If I want to just, starting with season 3, have us tackle, like, the whole season, or I might still divide them up just for feasibility of being able to, like, watch the episodes, but it won't be the same as this, where, like, this is a very clearly an emotional like end to a point in the story. And um and it's why I kind of almost wish there had been like a little break when they were airing the episodes between this and what follows, because I think it works so beautifully as, the sort of, self-contained, like, part one, of the season. And yeah, just the way it ends, just with, and especially with the theme that Bear wrote for this episode, which is Faith's theme. And the way it sort of culminates in that, in the graveyard scene, and the way the camera pulls back, and then the credits roll and that theme just softly plays. A bit of behind the scenes information. This episode originally ended with what will be the opening scene of the next episode, which is their return to Scotland. But it was decided in the editing, and I'm so thankful that they did this, which was to end the episode on this note, with them, at Faith's gravesite. And I like it because I like that this section ends in France, and that it doesn't sort of, because I think the shift to Scotland is just would have been too abrupt. Um, I think we need this sort of the emotional resolution of where this episode leaves off. And so that's the thing. Sometimes things work, and like when you're writing the script, and then sometimes in post-production you're like, no, actually it needs to be this way.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that this was the right choice to end it with this moment of Jamie and Claire at their daughter's graveside, saying their final goodbye. Like, it would have felt very jarring to me to have them all of a sudden, we're back in Scotland and bagpipes are playing, and it's like, again, it's Outlander Classic Edition back. It's like, no. This was emotionally the right way to end this this section of episodes. And again, credit to the writers and directors and the creative team that they recognized that and didn't rigidly stick to their original plan, because it would have taken away from the power of this moment for sure.
Yeah. John, yeah, it was just like, I have to say, it was so emotional for me going back and watching these episodes, because it has been a while since I've seen them, and it just feels like such a different era of the show.
Yeah.
Because like, I'm not spoiling anything, because you've said that you sort of know what the ultimate setting of the show is. The show kind of resides for you know um at a certain point, the show settles into the Americas.
Yeah.
And and that sort of becomes the home of the show. And so to go back to these early seasons where, part of the time we're in Scotland, then we're in France, and then it's like it always feels like a show that's sort of on the road, and taking us to these different locations. And that was so much fun. And the later seasons are rewarding in their own way, but it does feel very nostalgic for me to go back to these days. And but also that'll make it fun when we if you're open to it, and I have a feeling you will be, it's like once we do work our way through the all 8 seasons of the show, if we go and we talk about Blood of My Blood,
Mm-hmm.
which then returns to the Scotland and Castle Leoch, and all that stuff. It's like that was such a warm fuzzy feeling for me, because I have just such fondness for that particular flavor of Outlander, which we're going to get to get a
Yeah.
bit of in the next batch of episodes. But yeah, I did find out that season 2 of Blood of My Blood is actually dropping at the end of this year. So so it'd be nice if we can work this out to to build up so that we can cover those episodes live. But we'll see how quickly we move through
Yeah.
through the series.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it feels like we've got probably about at least 6 months till we get through everything.
Yeah,
But like, it's interesting you bring that up because, of course, like we haven't touched on this, but the series finale of Outlander just aired this past week, and you got to watch that, and then I got to go back to these episodes, and so it's nice to know that you feel like there's a connection where it all feels of a piece, and it's not this section isn't just like, remember that time they went to France for 7 episodes and then it was never mentioned again.
yeah. No, like I said, this like I can safely say that like these episodes feel even more consequential than they ever have before.
Yeah.
So so yeah. Um, but yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I like hesitate to say too much about my reaction to the finale, just to not like, ruin anything. But I will say it was both immensely satisfying and also left me craving more. Uh, so so yeah, I have my thoughts about they claim that this is the end of Outlander proper, but I have my doubts. I feel like at least certain threads of the show need to continue on in one form or another, and so uh and who knows, maybe they'll get to those threads in Blood of My Blood. It is a time travel story after all, um
It's
so who
possible.
knows.
It's possible, but also maybe they'll do what a lot of shows it seem like are doing these days and make like a sequel return series in a few years.
Yeah,
Because I know, isn't there like one more book that the author
yeah,
hasn't published or?
that's the thing. Like the series ends basically, and I haven't read the book, so I don't know how well they line up, but it's broadly it sort of ends with the ninth book. Um, and there's still a 10th book yet to be published. So, um, so yeah, and they've certainly made their own decisions in terms of like the final season that, from what I gather, are different from the books, which was sort of inevitable because they had to you know, end the story. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, what they do. Like I said, I think at the very least, like, even if like Claire and Jamie's story ends there, um, yeah, I feel like they're still going to want to continue other threads that are kind of left a bit more open ended. And so, um, I don't know. I don't think the story is finished. So
Yeah, we've got a commenter in the chat, Lisa Cooks, which thank you for joining us, Lisa.
yeah,
But she points out that they, and again, I don't know the specific, but she says maybe they'll get some series and a wrap up movie, which that I actually think sounds even more feasible than another season. Maybe they do a movie that they could cover the events of the final book, which I have more faith in Diana Gabaldon finishing her series than other authors, shall we say?
yeah. Yeah, but you know what? But also, like, and I don't know how long it'll be before they, decide to do something like that. But I'm also really looking forward to them now making the time to read the novels because it's something that I've held off on for years because I kind of, well, okay, the reasons were twofold. One was because yes, I did want to sort of, enjoy the series on its own terms, without doing the Game of Thrones thing where I had read the books and so like I kind of knew where they were going at least up until a certain point and then and then it was thrilling because I didn't know what was going to happen. I wanted to sort of, and also because I knew they were going to change things with the show, and so I was like, let me just enjoy the story that the show is telling. But now with the show having ended, like now I feel like, okay, now I can read it. The other reason, of course, was that I always have a million things to read, and it felt easier to take those off of my read my to read list. And so yeah, I just got to find the time now. I'm really trying to rededicate myself to reading now. Um, and so hopefully I'll do that sooner rather than later. Um, but but yeah, I but yeah, back to like this season, like I just found it so intriguing how so much from this season has like, and like I said, there's ramifications to the events of the season which will happen sooner rather than later, but also like there's a lot of stuff that came back in the final two seasons, and which I just was so thrilled by. Because I love when there's connective tissue, with things that seemingly are in the past, but then, get picked up in ways you weren't expecting. So, so yeah. Um, so yeah. Uh, any sort of, other things we didn't talk about that, caught
The
your attention?
the only thing that I really want to make sure we dedicate time for is just a section praising the greatness of Murtaugh
Okay,
season
yes.
because
Yeah, I feel like we kind of like underserved him in the stream because he is so great because all the yeah, all the stuff with like how much he hates France and like, and when him and Jamie are practicing fighting out in the
yeah
open early in the season and like all the people are gathering, it's like, what's the matter? Haven't you ever seen two people, practice duel before? And then he talked about like missing Rupert and Angus.
yeah
It's like we miss them too.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I don't have them all in front of me, but just so many iconic Murtaugh burns on France and everything like that. When they're practicing, he's like, look at me out of breath after hardly an hour. It's the air. Arses and armpits. Too many people. The city reeks of the chamber. And then Jamie kind of points out, like, Scotland doesn't smell that great either. And he's like, that's different. And then when he says everyone in France looks like frogs, which again is, harsh, but he does, it's said with his charming Murtaugness. And yeah, the fact that I love the fact that even though he is disgusted by France in so many ways, he's then quite taken with some of the dress, the women at the parties, and then of course he has his little fling with Suzette, which I don't know if she's coming with him back to Scotland, but they had a good thing, they had a good thing going. I love the fact when they're getting dressed up for the raid where they're going to steal the wine for the shipment, and he's so disgusted with the costume he has to wear. He's like, if I get captured, kill me first. Would you be so kind as to kill me? I refuse to be hanged in this. And then and then Suzette's like, well then I'll help you get out of it real quick. It's so much fun. And then but also there's a great emotional moment where you already touched on Murtaugh's kind of a feeling of guilt that he wasn't able to protect Claire and Mary and Fergus from the attackers, and Jamie recognizes that and realizes like, well, then you get after them, like, gives him something to do. And then there's the absolutely beautiful moment where they tell Murtaugh the truth about Claire's time travel.
Get
Yes.
to that, which is like it's a big deal. Like
Yeah.
this is an incredibly important moment, particularly in the relationship between Murtaugh and Claire. And
Yeah.
and just I love that he's like, if you're saying that your wife is a witch, who am I who am I
Who am I
to
to say
disagree with
otherwise?
you,
But
to say otherwise?
then of course he punches Jamie and is like, "That's for not telling me earlier."
It's like, you should have told me this from the beginning. And
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's what I love about like, Murtaugh's like, it's like they're so worried about whether he's gonna believe this or not. He's like, this just makes things so much easier. You should have just come out with this to start with. And yeah, and then the beat with Claire. where then he's talking about, he recognizes what a burden this has been on her to carry this knowledge. And I love that, like, and we can have the conversation on, like, there's like people who, like, characters who find out about the truth, and you're like, you know, is it a little too convenient that they take it as well as they do? But it's like, but there's an emotional truth, between some of these characters. And I think that, like, I think that, like, characters like Murtaugh, who have come to know Claire, so well, and he has this absolute trust in Jamie as well. Like, there's no part of him that would doubt their sincerity, and it's like the fact that they're telling the truth. And if it's good enough for Jamie, it's good enough for him. And so I just love that he accepts it, and his response is more on the practical side of things, of like, you have any idea how much simpler this would have been if I was working with, the full story?
Yes.
And and I just love it, because I think, if anything, he and Claire are even closer after this. And it's just, it's their relationship is, as much as, like, when it comes to Murtaugh, sort of the key relationship is obviously between him and Jamie, but I just have always loved his relationship with Claire, just because it's like, because Murtaugh is basically, Jamie's adopted father. And so, and so, you know, and so he's like, basically, father-in-law to Claire. And, and I just think it's such a beautiful relationship that they formed, and continue to form. And so I just, and then I will say that, like, again, I haven't read the books, but I have heard things like he is in much more of the show longevity wise than he is in the books. And I think a big part of the reason for that is because he just has the character and the actor just have so much amazing chemistry with, particularly with Sam Heughan and Katrina Balfe. It's like, why would you want to say goodbye to this, this character, when you can keep him along and keep him around for a while longer? So, like, so that's one of my favorite decisions they made, because he is absolutely one of my favorite parts of the entire show.
It reminds me a little bit of the dynamic with certain characters we had in Game of Thrones, where, like, the show kept them around longer than their book counterparts. Characters like Bronn, for instance, just because they were so much fun. And in particular, the actor who plays Murtaugh, Duncan LaCroix, like I said, he was kind of an MVP for me in these section of episodes, because I liked him in the first season. But I will acknowledge, like, I think when we talked about, like, the back half of Outlander, I confess that, like, my interest was kind of waxing and waning, like, during the sequences where Murtaugh and Claire are wandering the Scottish countryside looking for Jamie as a traveling singing troupe. And you were just like, this dynamic is important, because this will be a very important relationship. And, like, and I actually do think that, like, now having seen season 2, it's like, it retroactively makes me appreciate those episodes more, or episode, I should say. And that scene where he, like, writes down all the years from 1918 to 1945 and shows them to Claire, like, you lived through all these years. And she talks about, yes, like, this is the year I was born. This is the year I, went to became a nurse. I went to the war, the World War. And that scene was in the trailer, so I knew it was coming. But yeah, I love the moment where she confesses, even though she has all this great knowledge from the future, she doesn't know. For instance, she doesn't know when Jamie dies. She doesn't know when Murtaugh dies. She doesn't know her own fate. And I love that Murtaugh's response to that is basically like, I wouldn't want to bear that burden, And this is where the kind of the idea of, like, their futures are not set in stone yet comes into play, because, like, for certain characters where, like, player is able to wield like knowing the date of Blackjack Randall's death against him as a weapon. Like if she was carrying the knowledge that, for instance, like Murtaugh and Jaime die on this day, that would be a burden that she was having to live with. It would be a crushing burden. And it's kind of beautiful that she doesn't have that knowledge so that they can be living this life together.
Yeah, oh God, there's so much I want to say. But that is far, far away from where we are right now. Yeah, and just real quick, I'm gonna put up this comment as well. Lisa Tritt says, I was a show watcher first. I read the books during my first Outlander between season 6 and 7. The show is the appetizer, the books are the gourmet meal. That just makes me so excited because for me, the show has absolutely been a gourmet meal. I have loved, all of it, and so to know that like the books are even going to be even more fulfilling, which I always suspected would be the case, because that's the nature of adaptations, is like, you make certain decisions, and there's also like, even when even when a book is extremely like loyally adapted, to the screen, like with minimal changes, like there's still so much that you're missing because of the just the nature of of the written medium, and and the fact that there is just so much more you can do with like lingering in the heads of characters and sort of world building that kind of you have to, even though I think this show does a great job at world building, incredible. I mean, just look at this season, like what they did. But like, you're always going to be sacrificing a certain element of that. And so, yeah, I very much look forward to immersing myself in the books. I think that's going to be really exciting, in the same way that I'm looking forward to doing the same with the Expanse books, which I also haven't read. I have to imagine that's going to be quite the experience for me as well. So yeah, so now I just have to make the time to do all this massive reading. But yeah, so I want to know what are you looking forward to? What do you think will be lying ahead? And yeah, like, what are your hopes and dreams for what follows?
I am very much looking forward to, as I said, getting back to, even though this adventure to France was great, and we met a lot of wonderful characters, catching up with a lot of the characters that we got to know in season 1. Because, for instance, if the Jacobite Rebellion is indeed starting to brew, I imagine Dougal has been busy preparing for the coming of the Bonnie Prince Charlie, and Colm and Jenny, as I mentioned. Hell, I'm even gonna be even excited to see Weary. What's that little scamp been up to? But obviously, as
that'll be a short-lived feeling.
Okay, all right. I had a feeling, but you know what? Absence sometimes makes the heart grow fonder. But I do think that, like, as you've kind of pointed out, like the fact that we have this big kind of looming foreshadowing coming up with the Battle of Culloden, and the fact that we know now that like Jaime and Claire are not successful in their efforts to, change that outcome, and so the Jacobite cause is doomed. And that there is kind of an interesting element to put in where, like, Jaime is, even though he's been working this entire time to try and undermine the Jacobite Rebellion, now that he's going to be going back to Scotland, I think there's a part of him that's going to feel like obligated to, stand with his countrymen and, honor his pledge to his laird, and things like that. So, it will be kind of a way for us to see that, like, again, the characters are making these choices to try and shape the future, even if the ultimate outcome cannot be changed. And then I'm also interested to see how much more we get of the present time story integrated into this, because we essentially we had that great first episode that was mostly taking place in the present, and then we had that very brief interlude at the beginning of episode 7 where we see, I think it was in 1954 in Boston, with Claire and her daughter Brianna, who's now like 7 years old or something along those lines. I'm wondering if like we are going to get, more of those, kind of life in Boston in the 1950s interspersed with the story, or if it's just going to be all Scotland in the 18th century. So that's what I'm interested in, and obviously, yeah, I don't expect you to point one way or the other, but I do know that we are. I have a feeling that this is all leading up to essentially the Battle of Culloden Moor, and the fact that Jaime will ultimately have Claire go back through the stones because it feels like their time together has ended. But of course, they will find their way back to each other. But that will probably be in a later season, I would be my guess.
I'm not going to comment on any of that.
Awesome.
But yeah, no, it makes me, honestly, it just makes me wish we were jumping right into the next batch of episodes. But we have something special coming up next week, which is something we don't very often do, which is basically like an immediate like reaction and review, and just diving into a new movie, which is going to be Star Wars: The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yes.
Which I am going to see on Friday in wonderful IMAX. I swear I'm not saying that to rub it in. Maybe a little bit. And then we're going to be talking about it that Sunday. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. First time Star Wars has been back on the big screen in a movie theater, as per the new movie, I should say, in 7 years since The Rise of Skywalker. And I can't wait because Star Wars on the big screen is really kind of where my love for this franchise started. It is still my favorite thing with respect to the franchise. As wonderful as all of the live action and animated shows are, like, for me, nothing compares to seeing Star Wars on the big screen. And I'm so excited to have that adventure again. Even though, like, I do say that, like, with the Mandalorian and Grogu, like, I have a feeling that this is going to feel a little bit more like, the TV show The Mandalorian blown up to, a bigger scale. Like, I'm fine with which I'm perfectly fine with. I'm just like, I have that expectation going in that, like, this is perhaps not going to give me like the staggering emotional catharsis that certain Star Wars movies like The Rise of Skywalker did when I saw them on the big screen. But I'm also very much looking forward to being open to whatever the movie offers me, which I think will just be a really strong, fun adventure.
I want to be clear, like, I'm staying away from any and all like coverage of the movie and everything. I'm like steering clear of all that stuff because I want to go into this as like blind as I can be, aside from the fact that I have seen trailers for it.
Yeah.
But like, something that really occurred to me is I was trying to think if it was like, as I was watching like the clips that have been released, because I think I've seen like 2 of them. Maybe I can't remember if I've watched the third one or not. I think I've just watched 2 clips. And then especially I listened to the Mandalorian and Grogu track from the soundtrack, which I've steered clear of like reading the track list because I can't believe they put that out a week before the movie's release. But I've stayed away from looking at it too closely, but I did listen to just one track from it. And it reminded me that, like, I've been open in the past that, like, The Mandalorian is not, like, my personal favorite flavor of Star Wars. I know it is for a lot of people, but I enjoyed the show nonetheless. And but the thing is, we've been away from it for a while, and like listening to that track and seeing some of the clips like reminded me that like I miss Din Djarin and Grogu, and like I'm really excited to see those characters in a big screen adventure. Now, as you said, it probably will feel a bit, more like the the TV show The Mandalorian than like a full like big screen spectacle like traditional Star Wars movies. But it's still going to be a much bigger canvas than they've ever had before for the show, and I like what I've seen as far as like the scale of things and like the clips I've watched and the couple of trailers I've seen. Like they very clearly have done some different things with this where they're shooting on bigger sets and locations and like and so it has amped up the scale for it. And but I'm just looking forward to spending time with these characters because like absence does make the heart grow fonder. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun and I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. I'm hoping to see the movie twice before we talk about it. Maybe like go see it on Thursday and then Saturday, but we'll see. Definitely, I'll see it obviously before our discussion. And yes, as you said, we don't do this very often, but it felt like too much of a great opportunity to pass up, especially given that we just wrapped up talking about all of the other Star Wars movies, and now we have a brand new one to talk about, which I'm and. Well, if I say that there are certain things that I'm like no longer like expecting, it's more just because the one thing that has kind of trickled out from Jon Favreau is that like this is going to be a movie that's accessible to anyone, even people who haven't seen the TV show, which I think is great. It just means that I have to recalibrate like maybe some of the threads like from Mandalorian season 3 that I was hoping to see continue on. Maybe they won't get to that this time. But that's okay. I'm open to whatever adventure they want to share, and I'm very, very excited
I'm sort of excited that like it's just going to be a fresh adventure with these characters and that like I have a feeling like there will be like connective tissue for those of us in the know, but it's not going to be anything overt, and so. But I like that. Like we have to remember that when Star Wars came out in 1977, there weren't any like connections to any other thing because it was the only thing. So like it's okay for us to just be looking forward to having a fun big screen adventure. Like that's kind of how the whole thing started off.
Yeah, no, it's more just like, I mean, this is a case where like our dear friends at Force Center had kind of like when they were talking about like Grogu's trauma and like we had seen him with Kelleran Beck in season 3 and kind of I admit they raised my hopes for the prospect that maybe they were taking Grogu to Jar Jar Binks, and I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we got the return of Jar Jar in this movie? And it's like I no longer think that's happening. But we are going to get some other interesting characters from the past because I am very excited, even though it's been memed to death and joked about.
We're not getting Jar Jar, but we're getting Stinky.
You read my mind. We are getting the Pedunky Muffin himself, Rada the Hutt, who has been working out ever since we last saw him, and like I actually like cannot wait to see that character back on screen. And Embo, of course, because where there is Dave Filoni, there is also Embo.
Yeah. So like I said, yeah, I feel like there's particularly like it feels like connective tissue to Clone Wars in like deep cut ways that yes, like it's not going to register to general audiences, but I'm gonna have like a lot of fun, and we've got Zeb and like it's connections to stuff that may not like mean much to normies, but it's stuff that like I never expected to get referenced in a big screen Star Wars movie. So like I'm over the moon about what it looks like we are getting. So yeah. Something else I want to discuss because we're doing that next week, and then the week after that on May 31st, we're going to be talking about Outlander season 2, the final 6 episodes. But then we've had the week after that open. I am like, I'm putting you on the spot here. because we talked about it, and I know we were talking about not being sure when the home video release was going to happen, but then something happened and it came out on streaming. Do you want to talk about Project Hail Mary?
You know what? I would love to. The only reason I hadn't brought that up was because I knew that we only have the digital release and not not the physical. And
That
I know you've been selective in which movies you're buying on digital versus waiting
here's
for the physical.
here's
But
here's the thing.
I already bought it. I already bought it. So
The physical release is not coming out until August 11th. That is still a ways off. So like I feel okay with going for the digital release early because I'll get a substantial amount of time to enjoy that before the Blu-ray is even released. So yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
nice,
We're
nice.
gonna do that on June 7th. Uh, and then we're gonna save still the week after that is our 100th stream celebration. We're I'm still going to hold off on that as a little bit of a surprise as to what we're talking about. But yeah, then and then we got something else coming after that. I'll kind of save that too. We can announce that later. And then after that we will, before I go on my vacation in July, we'll also be getting to Outlander season 3, which I think we probably will divide up how I've got it here, just with the knowledge that it's not going to be like um, these first 2 season discussions where I feel like that midway point has been like a big emotional break between volumes. The future breaks in upcoming seasons are going to be more just a function of not killing ourselves with with tackling too many episodes in 1 week. So but yeah, so that's a look at what's ahead, and I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. Yeah, you got any other comments before we wrap this up?
No, just thank you to Lisa Cooks in the chat. We always love having
Yeah,
people come in and join us live. And thank you to all of you who are watching, even if you're not, commenting on the live section. We have noticed that our last 2 streams have done bigger numbers. The Excalibur discussion, and then especially our Maul Shadow Lord discussion from last week.
yeah,
So thank you both, everyone, for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe and all that other YouTube stuff. But we're so happy that we're still able to go on these journeys with y'all.
yeah. I remain just so over the moon to finally be going on this journey with you, Jared, because it's twofold, because of course I love the show so much, and it's sort of been sort of this dangling idea over for a long while about getting you to watch the show, but also because this is the first time we've ever done something like this where you haven't seen the show and you know you're watching it bit by bit as we go through it. And I always sort of love those sort of reactions slash discussions on podcasts and YouTube channels where like one of the people has seen it and somebody else hasn't. Like going back, that was one of my favorite aspects of the Game of Owns podcast, where
Yeah.
we're like half of the people on that podcast like hadn't ever watched or hadn't read the books, or so didn't know what was coming ahead. And then the other half kind of sort of evilly was doing the Mr. Burns thing. And so I'm glad that we finally get to do something like that on this channel. It's fun.
It is.
Yeah. But yeah, no, yeah, I want to thank you also, Lisa Cooks. Thanks for coming in, and yeah, it's great also to get as somebody else who has seen the finale, because as I've stated of late, I have not been venturing onto like social media or websites like looking for stuff about like reactions to the show or any other shows or movies, because it's just become less rewarding for me to do that, because there's so much, that goes on online that I just feel is so toxic, and so it zaps enjoyment out of things. So I kind of rely on just chatting with my friends about the stuff I'm watching, or in the case of this, like people who come on and chat with us on on these streams. So yeah, it's been great to have you come in and and make your comments, and uh yeah. uh so yeah, I am just looking forward to getting to talk about the rest of the season. That's going to be so much fun, and so yeah. But first we have Star Wars, so we'll be doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's about it for me. I will show. I just remember I'll show off my gorgeous Blu-ray edition of season 2, which this is of course how I was watching my episodes, and this is why like Outlander, and is like the remaining thing where I'm continuing to buy the physical media release of the seasons, because I started all the way back in like 2015. And so I have to finish collecting the show. But this is why I have taken to now for new shows, with the exception of, okay, I caved and I placed an order for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But for the majority of things, TV shows are a big no-no for me, because just look at how thick that is. Don't have the room to continue doing this. And thankfully, the release for Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to be like a standard thin release, like a movie. So I can get away with that. But it's just, man, this habit is consuming that I've had over my entire life, basically.
Yeah.
So,
but
yeah.
But it's it's nice when you, as you said, like you've got to finish what you started for Outlander. Like I think you would feel like something was missing if you were just like, no, I don't have room for the final season on Blu-ray. It's like,
well, and I almost got extremely furious, because they have released all the soundtracks on CD for Outlander. Bear McCreary has been very good about like pushing for those CD releases, and they released the season 8 soundtrack on digital with like no word of a CD. I was like, oh, you bastards, you better not leave off the final freaking season of the show. And thankfully they eventually did announce it, and it's being released in a few days. And the reason for that is because there's a song in the final episode of the series that they were saving for the actual episode, for the end credits of the final episode, which they have now added to the existing digital release, and it will be on the CD version. So hence probably why they waited to release the CD version, to keep that a surprise. So yeah, I'm looking forward to adding that CD to my collection in just a few days time. So thank God.
Yeah.
Oh, because that's like I said, the Blu-ray came out in 2015. I think the first CD probably either 2014 or 2015. Like I've gone on before about how Outlander has been the reason why, part of why it means so much is just because it's been a mainstay for so long, over 10 years. And so the idea that they were going to cut off the last part of physical media for the music, I was absolutely livid. So I'm glad they're not going to do that. But yeah, okay. Thank you, everybody who tuned in live and is watching this later. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week to to talk some Star Wars, and we hope you have an absolutely wonderful night. And yeah, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.